being the world's most powerful magician, yet bearing the expectations of all people in the world. A great calamity has come to the human realm, just when everyone was facing despair. The girl wrapped bandages around her injured right eye. The magic wand waved in her hand. Her opponent was the Demon King, formerly known as Disaster. In this war, if the girl loses, the world will be devastated. Only by winning can she protect this land that has nurtured her all her life. The final battle between Disaster and the Great Magician will determine the fate of this world. Powerful magic clashed. After the violent fluctuations of Disaster's corrupt power dissipated, the girl looked down at the fallen Demon King. The Demon King used all his strength to threaten the girl. "Charlotte, I will definitely return." And in this war, unsurprisingly, humans emerged victorious. Even though Charlotte was the most powerful magician, her personal power was ultimately limited. She followed her master's arrangements. During her years, she chose 5 people as her disciples. They were also trained by Charlotte to become the world's most outstanding geniuses. But Charlotte, who lived for 122 years, still couldn't withstand the power of time. Finally, death began to erode her body. But Charlotte, in order to prevent her 5 disciples from knowing that she was about to pass away, went to great lengths to shake them off. After all, just because of 2 hours of not seeing her, those brats would use their strongest powers to search for her, turning everything upside down. If they knew about her passing, who knows what outrageous things they might do. Charlotte came to the prearranged magic array, slowly lying down on it. It's finally time to say goodbye to this body. The magic array was activated at this moment, and all her magic power would disappear after the array finished. Under the powerful magic activation, a cry of pain echoed across the wilderness. Then it became quiet again, and the magical will left by Charlotte floated to 5 different places on the continent. The 5 people who received the news, their hearts were torn, unable to accept this reality. But no matter how they searched, Charlotte's figure never appeared before them again. Until some unknown time later, in the deepest part of the world, the palace where Charlotte activated magic before her death, stirred with a slight movement. Is this heaven? Why do I feel like I'm still alive? Charlotte slowly opened her eyes. She sat up in disbelief. Pinching her small face, her body had miraculously become smaller. She quickly realized she had been reborn. What exactly was going on? But Charlotte had a hard time accepting the reality of her rebirth. After all, she had mentally prepared for the expected outcome. After her passing, her disciples should gradually accept the reality of her death and take on the responsibility of protecting the world in her place. But why had she awakened now? She thought carefully, and memories flooded her mind. In the last moment before her death, Charlotte had one final regret. That is, she had never experienced the bitterness of love in her entire life. She had never been in a relationship, and this damn magic, just because she was single from birth, wouldn't let her die just like that. The world's most powerful magic is, after her death, she miraculously came back to life. And the reason for this revival was actually because she had never been in love. As a result, the magic disdainfully revived her. But Charlotte didn't want to be revived. Just because her magical will had already informed her 5 disciples that she had passed away. But now she had been revived. If her 5 disciples found out, wouldn't they cause another uproar? She tried to release her magic, but her magical power had already disappeared when she performed the magic array. To prevent her 5 disciples from knowing her whereabouts, she had to go find that person. And there was a prominent figure in this city. That was her good friend, Geoffrey, the kingdom's strongest swordsman. Charlotte came here to seek his help. She learned from passers-by that the interval between Charlotte's death and revival was only a few days. But her first task was to go to a magic shop. "Hey, young man, could you tell me where the nearest magic shop is?" The uncle turned around, looking at Charlotte in disbelief. This little kid was calling him, right? But the uncle didn't mind and kindly told Charlotte the detailed address. Charlotte turned around and thanked him with a mature expression. With a yelp, the uncle miraculously flew out. Charlotte turned back in disbelief. The kind young man from earlier was now pinned underneath. But the 2 fighting men hadn't noticed the fallen uncle. They were fighting merrily, even climbing on a board to dance together. Poor uncle was being pressed like this. Who knows what might happen to him? And these 2 were just arguing over a small matter, debating whether Charlotte or her friend was more powerful. With the uncle's life uncertain, Charlotte ordered them to get down. "Get down, both of you!" They miraculously stopped. The reason for all this was the effect of Charlotte's residual magical power. But Charlotte herself didn't seem to notice. However, her magical aura was detected by a man in the distance. He arrived here at rapid speed. The newcomer was Charlotte's friend Jeffrey. He carefully probed the recent aura. Charlotte's magical aura had already disappeared. He didn't find anything unusual. But the man who was just arguing came running over him politely. He immediately asked Jeffrey if he was stronger than Charlotte. Jeffrey was very angry. He directly grabbed the man's mouth in a rage. Even if he was Jeffrey's fan, daring to disrespect Charlotte was purely suicidal behavior. Charlotte knew that if she didn't stop this, the man before her would be killed by Jeffrey. She tugged at Jeffrey's clothes, using a mature and familiar tone to scold Jeffrey for his impulsive behavior. Jeffrey quickly realized that this was Charlotte's tone. He immediately turned into an obedient puppy. I was just joking with him. But Charlotte's change made Jeffrey suspicious. Was this little girl really that once powerful magician? He lifted Charlotte up in disbelief. Charlotte coldly said, "Put me down before I get angry." This suddenly awakened Jeffrey, and he was certain. The girl before him was truly that powerful girl in his heart, because only she dared to speak to him like that. But on the other side of the world, Charlotte's disciples were turning the world upside down. "Master, I will definitely find you." The great magician reborn just to fall in love. But she didn't know that her disciples outside were tearing the world apart to find her. She was even fooled by passers-by that she had only been dead for a few days, making her not worry at all. Charlotte was about to start a new journey in her life. Beautiful clothes were for Charlotte to choose from. The salesgirl was startled when she heard Charlotte calling Jeffrey by his real name. After all, this kingdom's strongest swordsman was like a god to them commoners. But Charlotte had always been a busy person. Now finding herself must be important. During their conversation, Jeffrey vaguely learned the reason for her arrival from Charlotte. He never thought Charlotte was about to die. As a friend, Jeffrey's heart felt pierced by something. After all, this lively old friend suddenly said she had died before, and he was completely unaware. He blamed himself for not understanding Charlotte better. He also gently scolded Charlotte for always bearing everything alone. Tears involuntarily flowed from his eyes, frightening Charlotte into quickly changing the subject. She then found various excuses to gloss over it. She even comforted Jeffrey like a child, saying, "Don't cry, don't cry. Isn't it because you're a good friend that I came to find you after being revived?" Charlotte also told Jeffrey that the reason for her revival was mainly because she had never been in love, so magic wouldn't let her die, and wanted her to fulfill this dream. Jeffrey was also very incredulous. As a once incredibly powerful great magician, she turned out to be someone who had never been in love. Jeffrey, as a Grand Duke of the kingdom, decided to help Charlotte to satisfy her needs. He also decided to help Charlotte conceal her identity, allowing her to live a new life. Jeffrey arranged for Charlotte to join one of his subordinate families, which would be Charlotte's new identity for her future life. But Charlotte couldn't just be arranged by others. She said she wanted to examine his subordinates. Under Jeffrey's authority, his subordinate Phidon listed all his merits. But Charlotte expressed dissatisfaction with all of them. It was only when he said he didn't like spicy food that Charlotte nodded in satisfaction. Not being able to eat spicy food was quite appealing to her. But on her first day there, she encountered her first problem. She was actually mocked by two little kids. Did you hear that? That little pipsqueak just called us kids. They were Phidon's cousins. Charlotte's mature tone left them full of confusion. Charlotte was furious, but for the sake of her new life, she had to choose to befriend them. After all, a new identity needs new friends to be convincing. Meanwhile, on the other side, Charlotte had no idea that her disciples had gone crazy trying to find her. And Jeffrey was often pestered by them because of this. "Where is my master?" As a friend, Jeffrey had sworn not to reveal Charlotte's whereabouts. He insisted that he didn't know. But the 5 disciples didn't believe Jeffrey's words. They directly started to beat him up. Just as Jeffrey was about to fight back against the other disciples, they suddenly appeared. These were all outstanding geniuses cultivated by great magicians, each not to be trifled with. Jeffrey was so scared that he hurriedly surrendered. On the other side, Charlotte was troubled by adapting to her new identity. The young girl's small frame had averted the apocalyptic disaster, and she was crowned as the world's strongest great magician. She took on 5 disciples, each cultivated by her to become unparalleled geniuses in the world. To avoid her disciples worrying about her safety, Charlotte secretly left them just before her death. But shortly after her death, she was revived by magic's disdain, only because she had never been in love in her life. But after her revival, Charlotte didn't want her disciples to discover her whereabouts. She sought out her old friend Jeffrey, deciding to conceal her whereabouts for her. But during Charlotte's disappearance, her 5 disciples turned the world upside down looking for her, and Jeffrey was repeatedly harassed by her disciples. The disciples came on strong. It was supposed to be 1-on-1, but it turned into 1 against 3. Jeffrey was so scared that he surrendered. He had to endure their interrogation, but Jeffrey's mouth was sealed tight. With his 100-point acting skills, he successfully escaped the questioning of these geniuses. The disciples all complained. This old man really seems to know nothing. To ensure his acting was more convincing, Jeffrey again pretended to know nothing. Did something really happen to Charlotte? I hope you can explain in detail. The disciples directly ignored him. The 3rd disciple also swore. Even if he had to search the entire continent, he would definitely find the master. As the disciples left, the 5th disciple also left a threatening message before departing. "I'll be back." After they left, Jeffrey finally revealed a satisfied, smug smile. "I must hide her well. They absolutely cannot find her." The butterfly outside flew away contentedly. And this game of hide-and-seek continued for 8 years. The reborn Charlotte gradually grew into the appearance of a young woman. Classmates at school began to confess their feelings to her. Has beautiful love finally come to her? But unexpectedly, Charlotte rejected the boy who confessed because she didn't want to be an old cow eating young grass. After all, her inner age was already 129 years old, and these people were all kids in her heart. There was an insurmountable generation gap between them. Indeed, there are reasons for being single. She was revived to fall in love, but now she doesn't want a grandma-grandson relationship. Will Charlotte be lonely until the end in this life too? The 2 kids living with Charlotte urged her to attend a gathering. Charlotte followed their pace, but she didn't know her every move was being watched by a mysterious person from afar. At this gathering, they were to cultivate a plant called Lulu. This plant can display different colors based on the emotions of the person who plants it. When the cultivator is in a good mood, it becomes bright. Otherwise, it becomes dim. But all of this is not important. What's important is that when it shows a rare bright red color, it indicates that the cultivator will encounter a fated love. Charlotte, who received the seed, left with the children. But as soon as they left, they were followed by a man. He reached out to grab Charlotte. Judith, who was nearby, keenly grabbed his hand. It turned out the newcomer was their cousin Phidon. He came to relay a message that Jeffrey had something to discuss with Charlotte. This friend she hadn't seen in 8 years had finally come to find her. Charlotte arrived at a carriage. Inside the carriage, Jeffrey was holding bright red roses, looking at her with infatuation. Just because she had never been in love, the great magician was revived due to magic's disdain. She needed to have a romance to make up for the regret left in her previous life. Until the day she grew up, boys pursued her. But because her true inner age was too old, she didn't want to date young people. She ran into the carriage. Her friend Jeffrey, whom she hadn't seen in 8 years, was holding red roses and looking at her lovingly. Charlotte was dazzled by Jeffrey's appearance. "Why are you dressed so gorgeously? What's with these flowers?" Jeffrey told her the flowers were picked up by the roadside. "Do you want them?" Charlotte directly refused. He tentatively asked Charlotte, "Have you heard any rumors in these 8 years?" Charlotte was very confused, but knowing Charlotte hadn't received any news, Jeffrey again avoided this question and instead asked about her feelings on her new life. "Have you found the love to make up for your regret?" Charlotte felt guilty when asked. She had rejected so many young people just because she couldn't accept these 18-year-old kids. Jeffrey had a sudden inspiration. He leaned close to Charlotte. "Why don't you consider looking around? Maybe that person is right by your side." Right before her eyes, Jeffrey gazed at Charlotte affectionately. But Charlotte was completely oblivious to Jeffrey's implications. Memories of her past life suddenly attacked her. Her excited little heart suddenly began to beat violently. Burin, the former knight commander. He must be 90 years old now, right? Is he unmarried? Could you introduce us? Jeffrey regretfully informed her that the commander had passed away last year. But Jeffrey still frantically hinted, "Think about it. That person right in front of you. Could it be Alfin, the finance minister? His grandson's daughter just got married recently." "Oh, then congratulations to him. Why are you suddenly shouting so loudly? Your pants will get dirty. Sit down properly." Jeffrey was very helpless. He sat back in his seat. It seemed this niece couldn't be swayed now. But Charlotte remembered her 5 disciples. After all, it had been so long since she'd seen them. Were they still doing well? Jeffrey hesitated for a moment, then weakly told her they were all fine. Meanwhile, somewhere near the Empire, a little girl was hiding deep in an alley. She was frantically running away, but unfortunately, she was eventually taken away, just because a man appeared nearby. The soldiers blamed the source of the crime on him. That was Charlotte's third disciple, Danmont. But how could the soldiers possibly catch him? As one of Charlotte's disciples, magic came at his command. He then disappeared from everyone's sight. But Charlotte knew nothing about all this. After leaving the carriage, Charlotte wandered the streets. How were her disciples, whom she hadn't seen in years, doing now? She returned to the gathering place to retrieve Judith's handkerchief. But at that moment, a familiar figure appeared before her eyes. It was her third disciple, Danmont. Before her death, the young girl had taken on 5 disciples. Each disciple was nurtured into a world-class genius by the young girl. But after her revival, she didn't want to be discovered by her disciples, just to let the disciples live their own lives. After 8 years of this, Charlotte unexpectedly ran into her third disciple. Danmont turned his head. Charlotte foolishly covered herself with her clothes. "Can't see me, can't see me." Danmont looked at her strange behavior, becoming curious involuntarily. But Charlotte suddenly turned around sharply and ran away. Her odd behavior caught his attention. Danmont directly used magic to appear behind Charlotte. Charlotte quickly turned her head. Powerful magic poured out. Danmont was sent flying. Taking advantage of his disorientation, Charlotte quickly left the area. With disheveled hair, she scared the nearby kids who frantically asked about her situation. From what they said, Charlotte realized that her third disciple was somehow connected to the Jingxi kidnapping case. She couldn't believe it, because only she knew that Danmont was a gentle and kind person. 30 years ago, he was taken in by Charlotte as her third disciple. As a child, Danmont went through countless nightmares and shadows just because he had demon blood. People called him a demon, but only Charlotte knew that this child simply couldn't control his abilities. He often went berserk, but didn't want to hurt those around him. But people were all afraid of him. In all this pain, he chose to bear silently by himself. In the end, only Charlotte approached him. She gently told Danmont that he wasn't a demon, and Charlotte's heartfelt care successfully led him out of the shadows. Charlotte firmly believed he wasn't a murderer. She wanted to investigate and clear everything up. From the butler's reaction during questioning, it seemed her friend Jeffrey had known about this for a long time, but he didn't tell her. Under the starry night sky, there was a light figure on the city wall. Charlotte, cloaked, dodged one patrol of soldiers after another. But in an instant, the soldiers suddenly all collapsed. Charlotte came down from the roof, investigating the cause of all this. In the distance, cries for help could be heard. It turned out that the kidnappers were brazenly committing crimes. They seemed to be searching for someone. Golden pupils and golden hair. This person looks quite similar, but all this was seen by a bystander nearby. The kidnappers smiled wickedly. They directly approached the witness. The girl begged desperately, but these kidnappers seemed to be just amicably discussing an agreement with her. This familiar magical power was also detected by Charlotte. She instantly appeared beside everyone, startling the nearby kidnappers. This person suddenly appeared, and they were completely unaware. Charlotte unceremoniously threw a punch at him. The magical aura of these guys was very similar to her third disciples. She decided to find him, to understand everything clearly. The disciples, in search of their deceased master, had traversed mountains and seas. But no matter what, they couldn't find any trace of their master. Only because all this was the master deliberately hiding from them. And as the third disciple, Danmont, in order to find his master, he had captured everyone who looked similar to Charlotte. But Charlotte didn't know yet that her disciple's kidnapping was all for the purpose of finding her. As the director of Black Moon, Gilhart actually came out to capture people himself. And the only person who could order the director was Danmont. Charlotte wanted to go and understand everything clearly. She slowly uttered a few words. "Let me also taste what it's like to be kidnapped." And Gilhart was just thinking the same thing. After all, Charlotte's characteristics matched exactly with the person they were looking for. Light golden hair and golden pupils. "All right, miss, we'd be happy to kidnap you. Please come with us." And that mysterious person had been following Charlotte all along. He saw all of this. Arriving at Danmont's lair, Charlotte discovered that these people who had been taken by Black Moon were chatting and laughing vividly. They didn't look like they were kidnapped at all. At this time, Gilhard also came out. He said to everyone, "Have you ever raised large dogs or similar pets?" Everyone eagerly answered the question, and Gilhard told them that what they were about to do wasn't much different from interacting with pets. So if everyone doesn't provoke it, it won't bite. After saying this, Gilhard led everyone, forming a single file line, and walked into the depths of the house. And inside the house was Danmont. His sharp, cold gaze was full of disgust for the mundane world. Charlotte, frightened, shyly hid back a bit. What had happened to this child? At this time, Gilhard took out an eye patch. Subsequently, the people brought in all tried on the eye patches. Charlotte now understood. Her third disciple was searching for her whereabouts. And now it was Charlotte's turn to go up. Danmont slowly opened his tightly closed eyes. A pair of crimson pupils met Charlotte's gaze. It's over. Am I finally going to be discovered? Charlotte felt very nervous. But surprisingly, Danmont just stared at her intently, without taking any further action. Gilhard beside him had no choice but to give up. Then new people were brought in for Danmont to continue identifying. But at this moment, a piercing sound suddenly rang out. "Master!" Charlotte abruptly turned her head. It was an old man wearing an eye patch. At this moment, Danmont was excitedly holding his hand. He had clearly mistaken him for Charlotte. Charlotte inwardly criticized, but Danmont's next words froze Charlotte in place. His expression was extremely pained. He slowly uttered a few words. "Master, I can't sleep. I can't fall asleep." This scene deeply touched Charlotte's heart. What exactly had happened to them during the years she had disappeared from their sight? Looking at the kidnapping reward in her hand, Charlotte could no longer bear it. She had to go and figure out everything. She ran into a store that was about to close and pleaded with the store owner. "Please tell me about the rumors of the great magician's 5 disciples. Please tell me." Charlotte slowly learned from them that the eldest disciple, in order to find her, had directly led a group of magicians to the Klaus country 6 years ago. The second disciple, in order to research magic to resurrect her, had destroyed nearly half of the Pantera forest he was guarding. The third disciple, Danmont, had been extremely insane since 8 years ago. There was very little news about the fourth disciple, and Charlotte's fifth disciple, according to rumors, had gone to the demon land to search for something. As a result, he died there. After receiving all this information, Charlotte furiously walked towards Jeffrey's mansion. Jeffrey's door was kicked open. This scene also startled Jeffrey. Before he could react, Charlotte directly cast powerful magic, forcefully pressing him against the wall, glaring at him fiercely, demanding him to explain everything clearly. The 5 disciples, in order to find their deceased master, even disregarded their own lives. But they didn't know at all that their deceased master had actually been resurrected. And only the Grand Duke of the fallen country knew this news. But after resurrection, Charlotte, in order to let her disciples have a better life, decided to hide her whereabouts, not letting them find out, until 8 years later, when she encountered her face-blind third disciple. Charlotte slowly realized that because of her disappearance, her disciples had suffered greatly over these years. But the news from Jeffrey's mouth was that they were all doing well. She found her friend Jeffrey, wanting to clarify all the truth. She wasn't angry that Jeffrey hadn't ensured her disciples' safety, but that Jeffrey had deliberately buried all this information. Such big things had happened to her disciples, yet Charlotte, as their master, hadn't received any news. Jeffrey candidly told Charlotte the truth. Indeed, he had deliberately concealed all news about her disciples from her. And all of this was for Charlotte to live a more peaceful new life. Because Jeffrey knew that if Charlotte learned about her disciples' situation, she would definitely be worried and unable to live the new life she wanted peacefully. Charlotte was very angry. She didn't expect such an absurd reason from Jeffrey's mouth. She directly gave him a flick on the forehead as a final warning, telling Jeffrey to quickly reveal the truth of these 8 years. Jeffrey didn't dare to anger Charlotte again. He hurriedly, like an obedient child, brought out all the documents from these years. Looking at the 2.5-meter-high pile of documents, Charlotte struggled painfully inside. How much had her disciples done in the years she was gone? Jeffrey also said on the side, "To prevent this news from reaching your ears, I don't know how much effort it took. They say trouble comes from the mouth." Hearing Jeffrey's words, Charlotte's furrowed brow was the best answer. Frightened, Jeffrey quickly apologized again for his actions. But as Charlotte's friend, Jeffrey knew there was a curse on Charlotte, and this curse would also limit her life. He would use every means to find a solution. Therefore, he hoped that before this curse was lifted, Charlotte would live this life only for herself and not worry too much about her disciples. But Charlotte's disciples were all extremely important to her. Just for this reason, to make her completely unconcerned about her disciples' lives. Charlotte was very displeased. She told Jeffrey that although she wanted a new life, it didn't mean she would abandon her disciples. Jeffrey didn't understand. He thought Charlotte wanting to date was just an excuse to avoid her disciples. He patted his chest again and said, "You don't need to lie in front of me." But Charlotte also told him that wanting to date was true, but she also needed to know about her disciples' living conditions. Only after understanding all the news about her disciples did Charlotte leave Jeffrey's mansion. Early the next morning, Jeffrey lay desolately in the messy room. It seemed he had a rough night, but Jeffrey didn't dare to complain at all. He even worried that Charlotte might dislike him because of this. After all, he could see that Charlotte was truly angry. He kept self-deprecating in his heart. If only there were just the two of us left in this world. After learning about her disciples' current situation, Charlotte couldn't let them continue living in pain like this. Charlotte would personally investigate each disciple's situation and hoped they would accept the reality that she would die. And by then, she wouldn't have to worry anymore, and her disciples could peacefully disappear from this world. Charlotte arrived at the place where the Black Moon sect was the day before. They had stayed here last night, so they must have left by now. But unexpectedly, someone suddenly jumped out from inside. She felt something was a bit off here, but she still used the excuse of asking for directions to seek clues. However, the man who ran out from inside was not a good person. He turned around and grinned at Charlotte as if he had seen prey. Charlotte also sensed something was wrong, but before she could react, this man dared to directly grab Charlotte's shoulders. With just 2.5 years of amateur skills, he dared to cause trouble here. Charlotte was about to counterattack, but the next second, the man was punched flying by a mysterious person who jumped down from the roof. That mysterious person unhesitatingly gave him another punch. Still not satisfied, he picked up the half-dead man and was about to punch him again. It was that mysterious person who had been following Charlotte all along. One more hit, and he would die. Charlotte, frightened, quickly called out to stop him. She didn't understand why the mysterious person would save her. But the mysterious man in front of her gave Charlotte a familiar feeling. The Grand Duke actually wanted to control the news about the girl, but was forced to reveal everything by just one glance from the girl. Whether the disciples' 8-year experience was fact or fabricated rumors, Charlotte needed to verify each one. But just as she arrived at the third disciple's previous residence, unexpectedly, she was targeted by bad people. But Charlotte, being a great magician, was more than a match for the man. Moreover, the mysterious person intervened to eliminate the threat. But the silhouette of the mysterious man always seemed familiar to Charlotte. She recognized him as the mysterious person who had been following her. Before they could properly recognize each other, sounds came from inside the house. Charlotte quickly grabbed the mysterious man and hid him aside, while she alone dealt with those mysterious gang members. The mysterious gang saw their companion lying on the ground. The atmosphere became tense again. "Who are you?" "Darren, why are you on the ground?" Charlotte lowered her gaze, her golden eyes hiding an Oscar-worthy desire. "I was just passing by and saw this person faint." The mysterious gang was stunned for a moment, not paying much attention. They then pretended to go along with Charlotte's lie, inviting her inside to thank her. But the mysterious man was still watching everything from the corner. Charlotte quickly waved at him, indicating that he shouldn't worry about her. The mysterious man didn't dare to disobey her words and could only silently watch as Charlotte was led into the house. These gang members were indeed not good people. As soon as Charlotte entered, they put handcuffs on her. There were several other bound people nearby. It seemed this gang was a group of human traffickers. Just as Charlotte was pondering what kind of gang this was, several people respectfully called out to someone, Lord Danmont, a big uncle with seaweed-like hair. They actually called this man Danmont. The kidnapped crowd nearby cried in fear. "Have I been kidnapped by the Black Moon?" These human traffickers seriously claimed that they were the Black Moon sect, and the seaweed-haired uncle was Danmont. It seemed these people were committing crimes and framing the Black Moon sect. Charlotte didn't take action. She wanted to investigate everything thoroughly. But someone was dragged out from the ground. It was Charlotte's third disciple, Danmont. Danmont kept his eyes tightly shut, seemingly oblivious to everything happening outside. Charlotte hadn't expected her disciple to still be here. Did the Black Moon group not take care of their leader when they retreated? Danmont was dragged to Charlotte's side. Charlotte stared at Danmont, remembering he was the same as a child. When asleep, he was like a dead fish. Thunder wouldn't wake him up. Like before, she gently stroked Danmont's forehead. The familiar touch suddenly came, and Danmont slowly opened his eyes. Looking at Charlotte in front of him, he instinctively called out, "Master." But the next second, Charlotte slipped away modestly, covering his face with her hat. The flustered Danmont got up, failing to recognize his rejuvenated master beside him. But Charlotte closely watched her disciple's every move. She wanted to see how Danmont would handle these things. However, Danmont obediently allowed himself to be tied up, not resisting at all. Charlotte felt a surge of frustration inside. This good-for-nothing fellow. The bound crowd was also loaded onto a carriage. The human trafficking gang took them to a forest. What came into view was an incredibly deep hole. Inside was a completely different scene. It seemed some of Danmont's deeds had been altered by villains. This place was now practically a massive dungeon. And behind all this, there must be some big shot backing them up. The captured people begged these gang members to release them, but the fake Uncle Danmont brought out a person from the prison. He immediately struck them hard with a club. Charlotte hoped Danmont would stand up and resolve these issues. But the fake Uncle Danmont was about to attack the capture man again. At this moment, Danmont started laughing loudly from behind. Everyone turned to look startled. The handcuffs were directly dissolved by powerful magic. Her good-for-nothing disciple, Danmont, was finally going to act. He was the third disciple taken in by the girl before her death. With his own powerful magical talent, he successfully created his own magic. Surprisingly, however, someone dared to impersonate their identity and commit evil deeds. And the real one was right in front of them, but these fake Karamis were still unaware. Just as they were feeling smug, Danmont directly broke through the handcuffs prison, and he was about to teach these imposters a lesson. The Black Moon force created by Danmont was almost all powerful magicians. Yet among these imposters, there was only one low-level magician. The rest were just some miscellaneous swordsmen. Danmont would let them know what true powerful magic was. He just casually grasped, and the uncle was tied up. But unexpectedly, this uncle had some minor skills. He suddenly broke free from Danmont's magic with a jerk. He hurriedly ordered his subordinates to attack Danmont. But who could have imagined the uncle's subordinates had already been restrained by a mysterious magical force? And the source of this magical power was the members of the Black Moon. These fake gang members were just annoying insects in their eyes. But things couldn't end just like this. Behind these people, there must be an even larger force supporting them. After all, with such a big commotion in the city, the guard didn't even notice them. Danmont had to use his own methods to interrogate him. Charlotte, who wanted to hide on the side, was still discovered by Gilhart. He hurriedly approached. The more he looked, the more familiar she seemed. Even though Charlotte tried her best to hide herself, Gilhart still recognized her. "Miss, we meet again." After all, Gilhart had been beaten by Charlotte before. He knew Charlotte's strength well and couldn't help but ask curiously, "Is being kidnapped your hobby, miss?" But at this moment, Danmont's interrogation of the leader began to show some progress. Surprisingly, the uncle's body revealed the long-lost demonic aura. Mumbling in the demon language, it was clear that this person had been possessed by demons. And the demons behind him were also searching for the missing Charlotte. But like the others, they had searched for a long time and still couldn't find Charlotte's whereabouts. Their purpose was to find the first Charlotte and reawaken their great demon king. But his actions unknowingly angered Danmont. Just because he said Charlotte was dead, Master was Danmont's sore spot. The demon before him dared to assert the news of his master's death. The aura around Danmont became increasingly unstable. Charlotte also sensed that something was wrong. She hurriedly turned around. Pulling out a dagger from a nearby underling, she attacked the uncle's magic wand. After the wand was destroyed, the uncle regained consciousness. But by this time, Danmont had already been angered to the extreme. Powerful magic poured out, and the uncle was blasted against the iron bars. Charlotte watched all this. She told Gilhart to evacuate everyone. As the Charlotte who had disappeared for many years, she wanted to stay and personally stop the rampaging Danmont. Master had been dead for 8 years. The disciples were still constantly searching for her whereabouts. Because Master was their weakness. That girl from the past, with her small body, had shielded the world from disaster. She took in 5 abandoned people as her disciples. The third disciple, Danmont had faced people's coldness since childhood, just because he had demon blood, but he possessed powerful strength. Danmont often went berserk because of this. And in his most helpless moment, it was Charlotte's appearance that helped him. Charlotte, with her powerful magical abilities, suppressed the power within Danmont. Her angelic, gentle smile was deeply imprinted in Danmont's young heart. But now he was going berserk again, just because of the demon's provocation. It once again deeply touched Danmont's heart. Because of Master's disappearance, they had been searching on their own for 8 years. He absolutely wouldn't allow Master to be dead. But 8 years ago, Charlotte had informed them of her death through a will. Danmont couldn't possibly accept this reality. All the actions these years were also to search for his master. Now Charlotte had been revived by magic. She also wanted to clarify everything anew, but she hadn't expected that her death and disappearance would cause her third disciple such pain. Gilhart beside her directly grabbed Charlotte, because in his eyes, Charlotte's past behavior was suicidal. He absolutely wouldn't allow it. After all, his boss Danmont was a great magician above level 6. Now no one here could stop him. Charlotte knew this young man meant well, but she was the only one who could control Danmont here. Gilhart grabbed Charlotte again. Why wouldn't these kids believe her? Let me go quickly, or I won't be polite. But no matter how Charlotte struggled, Gilhart insisted she run first. If I die, remember to collect my body. While they were fussing, Danmont's berserk state became even more uncontrollable. He suddenly attacked towards them. Gilhart stood in front to block. And at this life-threatening moment, just when everyone thought something was about to go wrong, Charlotte's magic power also burst forth. She slowly blocked Danmont's casting right hand, and his attack was deflected to the side. At this moment, Gilhart had no choice but to believe that the girl before him was so incredibly powerful. Charlotte warned them again not to use magic and to slowly retreat. But Danmont had already lost all of his rationality. His powerful right hand grabbed Charlotte's neck. Charlotte gestured to Gilhart beside her not to worry. She grabbed Danmont's collar again. With a determined gaze, she stared at Danmont. Don't you know who I am? The familiar voice surged in Danmont's mind. His forceful right hand slowly released Charlotte's neck. But his next action was incomprehensible. Danmont tilted his head. He grabbed Charlotte's hand again. Suddenly, he turned into a huge Shiba Inu-like creature. He sniffed Charlotte's hand vigorously. Then he buried his head in Charlotte's hair. Again, he was intensely inhaling her scent. The girl had been dead for 8 years, but her 5 disciples hadn't forgotten her. And the girl was revived by magic because she had never been in love. But during this time, each disciple had become a god in search of her. The disciples all wanted to possess their master's world. The third disciple, Danmont, went berserk but didn't forget the days with his master. Because the familiar voice appeared again, Danmont, as if proud, stopped his rampage. But the building here couldn't withstand their commotion. Because of Danmont's rampage, the cave was about to collapse. Charlotte quickly told Danmont's foolish subordinates to retreat. The subordinates looked uncertainly at their rampaging boss, and the berserk Danmont was startled. So scared, it seemed there was no choice. Charlotte had to use her unique secret method. She needed to awaken Danmont's memories of her. Only this way could Danmont's rampage be controlled. The night team members looked at Charlotte in disbelief, because they couldn't understand what Charlotte was about to do. Charlotte, like an old mother, guided Danmont. But miraculously, Charlotte's child-soothing behavior actually worked. They all seemed to have seen something they shouldn't have. Was this large, obedient dog really their powerful boss in their minds? After Charlotte successfully guided Danmont to the side, she quickly told the 3 onlookers to evacuate, and to take along that fake uncle. After all, he still held many secrets. Charlotte told them to use the 2nd level of the shock absorption spell outside and maintain the magic power at the 4th level. They couldn't let the outside world detect the disturbance here. Gilhart was shocked. Who exactly was this girl younger than them? So young, yet knowing so many rare magic spells. And the boss even obeyed her. Gilhart no longer doubted. He believed Charlotte could solve everything here. The flying team members all retreated, and only Charlotte and her 3rd disciple remained here. Looking at the familiar Danmont, Charlotte's heart also softened. Danmont had always worried her since childhood. Even though he had grown into an independent person, he still couldn't accept life without Charlotte. She tried to slowly tell Danmont some truths of life. Everything in the world has a beginning and an end. In life, one will always experience partings, and will also meet new people. She was happy that her former self had left good memories for her disciples. But she also hoped that in the days after she was gone, Danmont would learn to take good care of himself. That little brat from before should have grown up by now, and Charlotte's sincere farewell once again deeply touched Danmont's heart. Danmont suddenly reached out his right hand. He tightly grasped Charlotte's hand. Tears welled up in his eyes. "Master, after you left, I haven't been doing well at all." Danmont was like an abandoned child. He didn't want to leave his master like this at all. His master. But under Charlotte's comfort, he seemed to find a sense of belonging. He gently fell asleep. What followed was the collapse of the cave. The subordinates outside were worried about the situation inside. The next second, Charlotte appeared before them with Danmont, and all of this was witnessed by the mysterious person who had been following them. He clenched his fists. All this discontent could only be swallowed by himself. The disciples didn't believe their master was dead. Even though 8 years had passed, they were still searching for their master. Every place Charlotte had been during her lifetime, they had searched, but this once incredibly powerful master had now vanished into thin air before their eyes. But Danmont never believed this fact. If they couldn't find her in a day, they would keep searching. Until the last moment of death, they would find Charlotte. Charlotte had died, so they would do everything possible to resurrect her. The news of their master's death became a shadow for the disciples. Until their master appeared again, Danmont was redeemed from his berserk state. But when he woke up, he no longer remembered the rampage. He only knew that a little girl had saved him. From the girl, he could find a once familiar feeling. He woke up from the nightmare. Although he didn't know what had happened, judging from his tightly bound state, he had indeed been through a fierce battle before. The chains were broken with a clatter as Danmont struggled, and he would learn about his rampage from his subordinates. Back at the mansion, Charlotte pondered for a long time. She sorted through the recent events. She concluded that something big was about to happen. It seemed that her resurrection, just for falling in love, couldn't be properly realized. At least she needed to regain a clear understanding of her disciples' whereabouts. She arranged to meet Danmont at noon. But at this moment, a voice came from outside the door. A servant rushed in excitedly. "Miss, please come out and see." Jeffrey and his subordinates were lined up outside. What were they up to with such an imposing manner? It turned out Jeffrey had come to confess again. Like a prince in a fairy tale, he came with a tray full of flowers to welcome the princess. Charlotte was shocked to see this scene, frozen in place, while Jeffrey was smiling gently beside her. "I've come to pick you up." Charlotte hurriedly pulled Jeffrey back into the carriage. "Are you crazy? Why are you making such a big fuss?" Jeffrey was startled, thinking Charlotte was angry about last time's incident. But actually, Charlotte didn't understand what he was doing. What was the deal with those nights? Jeffrey said proudly, "I thought it was necessary to show everyone." But Charlotte, this big niece, didn't grasp the meaning behind Jeffrey's words. "What? Do you expect me to praise you?" Jeffrey coyly covered his mouth. "After doing so much, of course I want to feel the joy of being praised." However, Charlotte didn't understand emotional matters at all. She merely regarded this as a ceremonial entrance for an old friend, and failed to understand that this was all done for her sake. Charlotte told Jeffrey that the demon race was active again. She had always thought the mysterious person was sent by Jeffrey to protect her. From Jeffrey's tone, Charlotte also learned that this wasn't the case as she had thought. Charlotte silently vowed that the next time the mysterious person appeared, she would definitely uncover his identity. After saying that, she was about to run, but Jeffrey couldn't bear to let her leave. On the other side, Danmont had arrived at their meeting place. He also wanted to thoroughly understand the identity of this girl who had awakened him from his rampage. The lovesick Duke actually liked a girl over 120 years old. Roses were brought by carriage, just so the princess he liked could enjoy the sight. But the girl was clueless about love. Even with all the romance laid out before her, she couldn't appreciate the beauty of love. The girl still had 5 disciples to comfort, Charlotte said as she was about to escape from Jeffrey's carriage. Danmont woke up and ran to the place Charlotte mentioned, waiting for the appointment. The blurry memories from his rampage still lingered. Who was the girl that awakened him? Why did he feel an inexplicable familiarity with her? On the other side, Jeffrey was still showing concern for Charlotte. But Charlotte told her old friend that she had to meet with her 3rd disciple. Jeffrey, jealous, said that he recognized Charlotte at first glance back then. Charlotte naturally told him it was because it was him, so he could recognize her at a glance. Jeffrey was stunned by Charlotte's words. "Just because it's me? His face blushed shyly. Charlotte had no idea that her words would affect her old friend like this. Charlotte was thinking, after all, as the kingdom's strongest swordsman, his eyesight must be better than her 5 magic disciples. But before leaving, Geoffrey told Charlotte about a recent small incident. Charlotte's eldest disciple, Caecilian, who is now the emperor of the Mabel Empire, for some unknown reason, had launched a war against the Klaus Empire again. Charlotte was stunned. Is this a small matter? And what's with that expression on her old friend's face? It's so disdainful. Charlotte couldn't understand the reason for her eldest disciple starting a war, but she still had to meet with her 3rd disciple. These disciples were really giving her a headache. Charlotte couldn't help but doubt if her usually sensible self had made a wrong choice before her death. Should she not have secretly gone to embrace death? She arrived at the meeting place with her 3rd disciple, but Damont suddenly stood up. Upon seeing Charlotte, he seemed to have found a sense of belonging. He suddenly rushed to embrace Charlotte. Damont's face was filled with a happy smile at this moment, but Charlotte didn't want to reveal her true identity to her disciples yet. She wanted to appear before them with a new identity. Damont, I'm glad to see you. My name is Elia Allison. As a magician, Charlotte had lost all her previous magic after resurrection. Damont couldn't sense the magical aura of his former master from Charlotte. He only knew that the girl before him gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity. He sincerely introduced himself to Charlotte. They stayed like this for a long time. Damont's burning gaze seemed to pierce through Charlotte. Charlotte also wanted to explain properly to her disciple before her, but her heart wouldn't allow her to reveal her identity just yet. The strange atmosphere grew heavier, and the two sat quietly, until Charlotte sensed a familiar presence outside. She suddenly stood up. It was that mysterious man. He had indeed been following Charlotte all along. Charlotte suddenly left Damont's side. That person must be caught. The girl had taken on 5 disciples before her death. Each disciple had been trained by her to become an unparalleled genius, and they were all deeply loyal to their master. Even when the master told them she had passed away, they still kept searching for her. And the 3rd disciple had also met the resurrected master. But the mysterious person's appearance broke this tranquil scene. Charlotte ordered her 3rd disciple to capture him. Hearing this long-lost command, Damont smiled gently. This familiar feeling made the answer in his heart increasingly clear. He dared not disobey the order of the girl before him. Then came the pursuit of the mysterious person's trail. Charlotte could sense the aura of the Demon King's disaster from the mysterious person. If demons were to descend upon the world again, all living beings would suffer once more. This mysterious person who had been following her, what was his identity? Charlotte needed to figure out all of this. On the other side, Damont, following Charlotte's order, had locked onto the mysterious person's trail. But just as he was about to capture the mysterious black-robed man, the person skillfully dodged. The Black Moon members who had been watching nearby also noticed the commotion. They hurriedly divided tasks to help their boss. Meanwhile, Gilbert also noticed Charlotte about to take action in the distance. Worried about Charlotte's safety, he quickly came to her side. Charlotte's magic manifested, and a golden bird flew into the sky at her command. In the distance, Geoffrey also noticed the small bird in the sky. He immediately recognized it as Charlotte's magic. Before his subordinates could react, he also followed the magic. Damont was now in a standoff with the mysterious person. Their battle was about to break out. "Why are you monitoring us?" But the mysterious person didn't intend to answer his question. Damont had no choice but to try to force an answer through combat. But the mysterious person's movements were agile. He easily dodged all of Damont's attacks. The mysterious person also had no desire for a prolonged battle. Judging from the strong magical aura emanating from him, the mysterious person was certainly a powerful magician. Faced with Damont's magic, the black-robed man had no intention of fighting Damont. But at this moment, an evil aura appeared behind him, as if his master had been attacked. Magical beasts suddenly swarmed out from beside the mysterious person. He looked at all this helplessly, knowing Damont could handle these magical beasts. Then he continued to turn and leave. The magical beasts attacked the civilians. To protect the safety of these civilians, Damont had to pause his pursuit. But Charlotte was watching all this from the rooftop. She knew she needed to intervene. Behind her, Gilbert was passionately saying various things to Charlotte. "Miss, there's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time." But before he could finish, Charlotte suddenly left. He had wanted to extend an olive branch to Charlotte, inviting her to join Black Moon. But Charlotte had no time to chat with him. She had locked onto the mysterious person's aura. Then she teleported to the direction where the mysterious person was fleeing. The mysterious person noticed Charlotte descending from the sky. He stopped in his tracks. He slowly opened his arms towards the direction where Charlotte was falling. The girl had once shielded the world from disaster with her small frame, but the Demon King's aura had once again descended upon the world. She had to find out the identity of this mysterious person. The mysterious man watched as Charlotte fell from the sky. He no longer ran away, slowly opened his arms towards the direction where Charlotte was falling. Though he was the one being pursued, at this moment he was worried Charlotte might fall to the ground. But Charlotte didn't care about any of that. Because the mysterious person could summon magical beasts, Charlotte kicked the mysterious person with his open arms to the side. The mysterious person didn't intend to fight back, nor did he want to explain why he could summon magical beasts. Charlotte swiftly launched an attack towards the mysterious person. The mysterious person easily blocked Charlotte's attack. The first punch didn't work, so she tried another move, a sneak attack. The mysterious person's hat was taken off by Charlotte, but he quickly blocked Charlotte's subsequent attacks. He knocked Charlotte down to the side. From the man's features, it was clear he wasn't a demon, but a human like Charlotte. The man's silver hair caught Charlotte's attention. He released Charlotte. Then he ran away again. Even though Charlotte understood the man had no ill intentions, there were too many suspicious points about him. She wanted to clarify everything, but her reborn self couldn't use too much magic. Because she had been using magic continuously, her body now started to feel dizzy. The mysterious person noticed Charlotte had stopped chasing. He stopped as well. Charlotte also noticed that the mysterious person seemed to care about her. So she continued to pretend to be dizzy, which frightened the mysterious person and made him freeze in place. He couldn't bear to see Charlotte injured, but he was very indecisive at this moment, unsure whether to run or go back to take care of her. Charlotte considered it repeatedly. He decided to check on Charlotte's condition. Charlotte knew her trick was very underhanded, but all's fair in love and war. As the mysterious person ran over, Charlotte quickly cast a binding spell on him. The mysterious person didn't react in time. His hands were locked up. Charlotte took advantage of this moment and reached out her hand towards him. In a flash, the mysterious person's hood was also pulled off. Charlotte pinned the mysterious person to the ground, and his face appeared clearly in Charlotte's eyes. It really was that child, her fifth disciple, Evan. After his identity was discovered, Evan quickly undid the binding on his body. Then he said to Charlotte, "Charlotte, I'm not Evan." Hearing this, Charlotte grabbed his head and shook it furiously, saying, "You brat, I'm not Charlotte either." As expected of master and disciple, neither of their lies was believable. But at this moment, Evan could only let his master question him. He didn't dare move, not at all. However, the magical aura around Evan had changed significantly. Charlotte was about to ask Evan about his situation over the years, what exactly had happened to this child, why rumors said he had died. But at this moment, Jeffrey suddenly appeared, and he abruptly attacked Evan. This guy really ruins everything. The girl had 5 unparalleled genius disciples. Each disciple was trained by her to become a great magician in the world. But to prevent her disciples from knowing about her impending death, she fled from all her disciples alone, dying secretly in the darkest place in the world. Until 8 years later, when she was resurrected and returned to the world, she found that all 5 disciples had become extremely obsessed with finding her. The eldest disciple even started a war to find her. The 3rd disciple captured everyone who resembled the master. The 5th disciple even entered the Demon King's place of demise, just to search for traces of the master. The 5th disciple, rumored to be dead, had been quietly protecting the master, while the whereabouts of the remaining 2 disciples were still unknown. Now the 3rd disciple had already confirmed the master's identity, and the 5th disciple, due to secretly protecting the master, ended up being caught red-handed by the master. The master and disciple, who hadn't seen each other for a long time, were about to have a good catch-up. But the tranquility was broken by Jeffrey, who came from afar, just because he thought Charlotte was in danger. Charlotte irritably said to the newcomer, "Jeffrey, why did you attack right away?" She weakly pointed at her 5th disciple. "What if you hurt him?" Jeffrey meekly replied, "I was careful. How could I let you get hurt?" Charlotte was so angry she gritted her teeth. He obviously wasn't talking about her. But the 5th disciple, Evan, was about to counterattack. This old man, who claimed not to know her whereabouts, had finally been discovered by him. The war between the 2 was about to break out again, as Charlotte's most outstanding disciple, and the other being the kingdom's strongest warrior. It was hard to say who was stronger. To prevent the two from causing a bigger commotion, Charlotte quickly teleported between the two who were fighting enthusiastically and slowly stopped the fight between the two. Her eyes suddenly glanced towards Jeffrey, who was fighting even more enthusiastically than Evan. Frightened, Jeffrey quickly surrendered, fearing that if he fought any longer, he would be beaten. Evan took advantage of this interval. He quickly fled the scene. After all, he had many things he didn't dare to face his master with right now. He shouted to his master, "Charlotte, I'll wait for you and Mabel." Jeffrey couldn't help but sigh. So the person who had been following Charlotte was Evan. It seems Evan had recognized his childhood master early on. Charlotte glared at Jeffrey beside her. She shouldn't have let this guy conceal her whereabouts. Now her disciples, one by one, were in worse situations. But Evan now refused to face her directly. He must have his reasons. As Charlotte's most outstanding disciple, she was very clear about his abilities. If he intentionally hid his whereabouts, even Charlotte couldn't guarantee she'd find him 100% of the time. She believed Evan would definitely appear again. She decided to go to Mabel that Evan mentioned. Meanwhile, Damani had resolved all the issues on his end. Charlotte and Jeffrey quickly came together. But Damani felt very guilty because he hadn't completed the task assigned by the master. He apologized to Charlotte. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch him." Gilhart beside him quickly covered up. It was the boss who saved everyone here. Charlotte, of course, couldn't blame him like that. "You did great." Damani, being praised, was as happy as if he had eaten candy. Jeffrey, watching all this from the side, thought such a smart girl, yet so foolish in some aspects. Her disciples had all recognized her, yet she was still in the dark. But all this only made him love her more. So cute. Meanwhile, the eldest disciple was still planning to wage war against the Klaus Empire. But the contents of a letter from afar told him that Charlotte's whereabouts were in the Klaus Empire. He was very excited at this moment. Was he finally going to see his master? The girl was reborn just to fall in love. But she had 5 disciples, each of whom was a world-class great magician. And the disciples all wanted to possess the master for themselves. The 5th disciple, who recognized the master's identity, chose to silently protect her. The 3rd disciple even pretended not to recognize the master and stayed by her side. The eldest disciple was willing to start a war for her, just because he received news that the master was hidden in the Klaus Empire. The other 2 disciples were still searching for their master, Charlotte. As for Charlotte's friend, the Imperial Duke, he was a true romantic. In his heart, nothing was more important than Charlotte. But the Charlotte he had hidden was still found by her disciples. However, these disciples were all too crazy to find their master. They were willing to ruin their reputation and life. Take the 5th disciple, Evan, for example. He dared to go alone to the birthplace of demons to search for the master. Now he even brought evil back to the world. The eldest disciple was willing to ruin his reputation as a king to find the master. Somehow he got information that his master was hidden in the Klaus Empire. The 3rd disciple was now questioning Jeffrey. This bastard old man dared to hide their master privately. Now he's finally caught red-handed. But Jeffrey remained very stubborn. He couldn't let these disciples steal his thunder. But they also reached a consensus. That is, not to let Charlotte worry too much about this matter. Damani also decided to continue pretending not to know the master, even though he didn't understand why the master was disguising her identity. As the king of the Klaus Empire, due to the threat from Charlotte's eldest disciple, he now had no choice but to seek help from Jeffrey. That hateful old king actually demanded that he hand over Elia Allison. If not, he shouted, he would attack the Klaus Empire to the extreme cold lands. How despicable. And Elia Allison was Charlotte's identity in this life. But this young king seemed unaware that Elia Allison was the former great magician Charlotte. After all, only Jeffrey knew this identity for certain. But after the king's visit, he also discovered that Miss Elia Allison was the girl in front of the Duke. From Jeffrey's loving eyes, it wasn't hard to see that Miss Elia Allison's identity must be extraordinary. After all, she also knew that Jeffrey was once one of the great magician Charlotte's admirers. And the girl before him had Charlotte's golden pupils. As a king, he possessed keen intelligence. It wasn't hard to guess that the girl before him had some connection with the former great magician Charlotte. Damani was already troubled that Cassilian had discovered the master's whereabouts. And Gilhart happily told his boss that he was the one who told Miss Elia Allison she was in the Klaus Empire. He even wanted to invite her to join the Black Club. After all, in Gilhart's eyes, Charlotte was too amazing. Upon hearing this, Damani finally knew who leaked the information to the eldest disciple Caecilian. From the boss's displeased expression, Gilhart also realized what he had done wrong. Before he could react, Damani directly tied up this traitor upstairs. He needed to make him reflect well. And with the master's appearance, Damani again acted like a pitiful big dog. He learned that Charlotte was going to search for Caecilian. Damani also wanted to go along, but Charlotte was firm in not letting Damani follow her anymore. But Damani's burning gaze always softened her heart. Even the gluttonous king was afraid of the master's glance. But can you imagine? The childhood king was also a pitiful little baby. His helpless eyes were full of disgust for the world, yet also longing for a beautiful future. Just because in this country full of magicians, Caecilian, as the second prince, had no magical power at all. The citizens all mocked him. Even his father, the king, didn't think highly of him. And on this day, Caecilian's father summoned everyone to come. He had an important announcement to make. This was a test for the princess and princes. The child who won the first competition would be granted a wish by the king. The eldest prince, youngest prince, and princess all had their own powerful magic teacher. Only the second prince had no teacher. But surprisingly, Caecilian, who had no magic power, also wanted to participate in this competition. The king asked the second prince who his teacher was. This was a competition full of power and influence. For someone without magic power, participating in this competition could seriously endanger his life. Caecilian fell silent, but he still told everyone that he would participate in this competition no matter what. He also openly stated his wish to everyone present. He wanted to become an emperor. Upon hearing this, the audience all showed contempt for his words. The room erupted with laughter. Caecilian felt very wronged. The king granted his request. If he succeeded in winning, his wish would be fulfilled. The eldest prince then stood up. He respectfully asked those present if anyone was willing to be Caecilian's teacher. But everyone knew that no one would be willing to be Caecilian's teacher. The eldest prince's action was only to make Caecilian the subject of more ridicule. Caecilian was still hoping in his heart that someone would stand up. But unfortunately, none of the magicians present stood up for him. Just when he was extremely disappointed, Charlotte appeared. She had just returned and witnessed this scene. She scolded these magicians for being so hard on a physically and mentally weak child. But as the most powerful magician on the continent, people respected her. No one dared to defy her words. Charlotte's next words shocked everyone again. Charlotte took Caecilian as her first disciple in front of everyone. Caecilian, who should have been utterly disappointed, was now radiant again. And at this moment, he became Charlotte's first disciple. Now he had become a true king. But the master had been missing for 8 years. As disciples obsessed with their master, each of them was anxious to find the master. And they heard that a girl similar to the master was in the Klaus Empire. As the eldest disciple, he needed to confirm this fact. Single girls are single for a reason. As a powerful magician, Charlotte was reborn just to have a sweet romance. But there was a century-old friend pursuing her. Yet Charlotte remained unmoved. It wasn't that Charlotte didn't like her. It was that Charlotte herself was an iron-willed, straight woman, a genius-level great magician, but when it came to love, she had no experience at all. Because of the disciples' commotion, Charlotte now had to go to Mabel Wave's house again, just because the eldest disciple hadn't seen her. He was going to attack the Klaus Empire. Judith, who had always accompanied Charlotte, reluctantly saw Charlotte off, but he was very angry. These annoying people, why couldn't they just give up? He really wanted to catch them and throw them into a gurgling honeypot. His brother beside him couldn't understand why he was angry. Charlotte set off on her journey to meet the eldest disciple. But in her carriage, beside her was a gift box. It was the magic potion carefully prepared by Jeffrey. Because the reborn Charlotte couldn't overuse her magic power, Jeffrey was very worried about her depleting herself. And these improved magic potions were things he prepared for Charlotte's journey. Originally, he also wanted to accompany Charlotte to the Mabel Empire, but Charlotte refused him. These troublesome disciples of hers, Charlotte said she would go and investigate the situation herself. She didn't want to trouble Jeffrey to worry about them anymore. But she didn't understand that this was Jeffrey's own thoughtfulness. Jeffrey was very helpless. He told Charlotte that sometimes, I really want to tie you tightly by my side, unable to do anything, just watching this damn Yandere Duke's love sickness act up again. But Charlotte didn't understand at all. She replied to Jeffrey, "Do you want to keep me as a pet dog?" Recalling Jeffrey's previous behavior, Charlotte expressed some confusion. But as a century-old friend, thinking carefully, this guy seemed to have always been like this. Charlotte stopped thinking too much about his affairs. After all, now she had to go understand Cassilian's situation. After a journey, Charlotte arrived at their meeting destination. Accompanying Charlotte were some knights from the kingdom. But this frivolous knight came over just to tell Charlotte that His Majesty had instructed him to take good care of her, only because Charlotte was an important person to the Duke. At this time, an unpleasant fellow popped up, thinking Charlotte was very beautiful. But he was quickly beaten up by the female knight. This guy seemed unaware that Charlotte was a very important person to the Duke. But Charlotte still didn't understand. And at this moment, a portal suddenly opened. The arrivals were the Mabel delegation coming to greet Charlotte and her group. Charlotte hid behind her companions, lacking confidence, because she knew only high-level magicians could use teleportation magic. If high-level magicians are coming, there would definitely be people she used to know, until their figures clearly appeared in everyone's sight. Charlotte's delegation was stunned, because those coming to greet them were all noble figures. The Crown Prince, who usually wouldn't attend high-level meetings, actually appeared on such an occasion to welcome their small exchange delegation. But only Charlotte knew. Among the Mabel magician delegation, her eldest disciple, the King of Mabel, was also hidden among them. The young girl had taken on 5 disciples before her death. Each disciple was trained by her to become a world-class genius. But after resurrection, she only wanted to have a beautiful romance. Unfortunately, the disciples turned the world upside down to find her. The eldest disciple wanted to attack the Klaus Empire, where she was. The helpless emperor hoped she could act as the empire's delegation to negotiate. Now Charlotte saw her eldest disciple again, but she was still scared inside. After all, she had secretly passed away before. However, Charlotte's magic was now completely gone. Charlotte thought her eldest disciple shouldn't recognize her. But the eldest disciple's sharp gaze always made Charlotte feel guilty. While the delegations were exchanging pleasantries, Charlotte's feet unconsciously started running. By the time the delegation turned around, they found that Charlotte, who had been standing there, suddenly disappeared. And the Mabel Empire delegation also discovered their king was missing. Meanwhile, on the other side, Charlotte was running at full speed, panting heavily. And behind her was her eldest disciple. He was frantically chasing Charlotte, running wildly, making Charlotte ask Cassilian uncertainly, "Why are you chasing me? Then why are you running?" The two of them started playing a crazy game of chase. Charlotte couldn't possibly say that because she made eye contact with her eldest disciple, her legs instinctively fled. But she hadn't expected this brat to actually chase after her. And her disciple, who could use magic, was now chasing her with small steps. Charlotte's stamina was about to give out. She really had a lot to say, but couldn't express it. By the time Charlotte looked back, the eldest disciple's eyes seemed to be full of light, chasing after her like a fool, until Cassilian directly shouted at the girl. Looking ahead, Charlotte suddenly turned her head. Right in front of her was a tree branch blocking the way. She skillfully bent her back, and Cassilian took advantage of this interval. He caught up and firmly grabbed his master. But unfortunately, his foot slipped. The two fell down together again, as expected of a foolish master and disciple. Charlotte also furiously criticized her disciple. "Why didn't you use magic when you can?" But Cassilian pretended not to understand and apologized. "Young lady, I'm not a magician." This guy who always loves to act young and pretend. Charlotte stared at him irritably, until the two appeared again, looking disheveled in everyone's eyes. Both sides couldn't help but joke. "Did you two go to fight? Did you determine a winner?" Charlotte really had a lot to say, but couldn't express it. It's all because of this annoying eldest disciple. The ambassador who came with Cassilian was also very confused. Is this the girl the king often mentions? Does she really look so similar to the former great magician? But Cassilian couldn't sense any of the master's magical aura from Charlotte. After all, they didn't know the master had been magically reborn. The former magic power had long been lost through magic use. But in terms of appearance, Cassilian was also very certain. The girl before him looked exactly like his former master, so he needed to confirm Charlotte's identity more carefully. As Mabel's magical welcoming delegation, they also needed to use magic to bring the Klaus delegation to Mabel for negotiations. The teleportation array opened accordingly. The master had 5 world-class genius disciples, but the disciples were uniquely afraid that their master had disappeared, so they searched frantically until the master appeared. As the eldest disciple, Cassilian, Since he was elected as the king of Mabel, he had his own unique methods in governing the country. Therefore, Mabel was growing stronger day by day under Cassilian's leadership. But such a king rashly launched a war against Klaus 6 years ago, and his reason was only one: to find his master. After all, news of the master had disappeared from Klaus. It wasn't until Geoffrey intervened that Cassilian was successfully restrained. Charlotte looked at her disciple before her and couldn't help but worry. This guy really has never been reassuring from beginning to end. In Charlotte's memory, after the eldest disciple became king, he had never been calm in terms of being clingy, even though he's already a man in his 50s. In front of Charlotte, he always acted like a child. Because Charlotte didn't see him, he would frantically pretend to be sick. "Master, I might not have much time left. I haven't had an appetite recently." Charlotte had long seen through this lively disciple's act. "I saw you chasing your son with a stick yesterday." Cassilian, being discovered, finally agreed to jump out of bed. But Cassilian only did this because he wanted to see his master. Charlotte couldn't help but criticize her eldest disciple. But no matter how old he was, Charlotte had watched him grow up. As the powerful king of the Mabel Empire, when facing his master's comfort, he would always be exceptionally at ease. And Charlotte thought that after she passed away, Cassilian would manage the country well. But until today, when they met again, this good-for-nothing guy was still so unreliable. But Charlotte couldn't tell Cassilian about her resurrection secret at this time. She needed to better understand what her eldest disciple had done all these years. The magic array slowly opened. Cassilian, the ambassador beside him, used powerful teleportation magic until the magic array opened again. Everyone slowly followed. They were about to arrive in Mabel for negotiations. But that mischievous Cassilian turned his head and gave Charlotte a mischievous smile. Charlotte sensed something was wrong, but the magic array had already activated. Everyone disappeared from the spot under the magic array's power, until they appeared again. Before their eyes was a mysterious wilderness. The female knight from Klaus quickly raised her sword towards the people of the Mabel Empire. Because this wasn't their intended destination, she wanted to find out why they were teleported here. But only Charlotte knew clearly in her heart. This was where she fought the Demon King years ago. The girl had 5 genius disciples. Each disciple wanted to find their master, because the master completely disappeared 8 years ago. But the master just wanted to live a peaceful life after rebirth. However, the noisy disciples made her worry. From then on, she was forced to embark on a career path again. The powerful eldest disciple king now meets his resurrected master again. But the master didn't intend to tell him her true identity. Even so, the eldest disciple couldn't let go of news about his master, because the girl was 100% similar to the master. He brought the girl to the wilderness. This was where the master once fought the Demon King in the mountains. It was also a place full of memories for him and his master. Cassilian wanted to use the memories of the dead to test the girl. If the girl showed behavior similar to the master, then he could be more certain of the girl's identity. But the delegation that followed was at a loss. They didn't understand the purpose of the Mabel group. After all, their purpose in coming was to negotiate diplomatic matters with the king. Now that they were teleported to an unknown place, fear inevitably arose in their hearts. The show was just beginning. Cassilian planned to use magical beasts to test the girl's identity. The ground suddenly shook violently, until a magical beast called Rachnal appeared. This type of magical beast only appears in the Kabylon Mountains, where Charlotte once fought the great Demon King. But as magicians know, because of that war years ago, the Kabylon Mountains had become an extremely unstable, dangerous area, and magicians would be affected to some extent in this area. So it became a training ground for Mabel magicians. After everyone understood where they were, they fell into a tense state, just to deal with the magical beast that appeared before them. The female knight swung her sword at the appearing magical beast. The magical beast was quickly cut in half, but the body of the magical beast was recovering at an extremely fast speed. The ambassador from Mabel also told everyone that this type of magical beast can only be truly eliminated by completely crushing it. The female knight also frantically complained, "Are these people planning not to help?" The ambassador also told her that because they used up all their magic power during the teleportation, they couldn't help now. Then he immediately ran away after speaking, because only they knew very clearly in their hearts that these magical beasts were actually attracted here following the king's orders. At this time, nearby magical beasts also appeared in groups. Charlotte suddenly understood everything. After all, the group appearance of Racnal magical beasts formed a consensus. Someone must have been manipulating things behind the scenes. She glared at Caecilian. Caecilian faced the girl with blatant threats. Pretending to be innocent, he shrugged his hands. The smile at the corner of his mouth seemed to tell Charlotte, "This way you'll have to take action, right?" And the Racnal magical beasts used magic to attract more of their kind in groups. This was the technique Caecilian learned during his trial years ago. When Charlotte took him as a disciple back then, they also began that king's trial. And that trial was also manipulated by someone. During the trial, Racnal magical beasts also attacked them. The person manipulating behind the scenes was the crown prince, because he looked down on Caecilian, and Caecilian's desire to become emperor further angered him. The crown prince and his magician master also wanted to resolve everything through this. After all, Caecilian was just a useless person without magic power in their eyes. They didn't know at all that Caecilian was actually born with magic. It's just that these short-sighted people never discovered it, and his talent was further unearthed by Charlotte. Now the floating stones they were riding in the air were operated by Caecilian using magic power. But the crown prince couldn't believe it at all. After all, this person he had always looked down upon suddenly became so powerful. His inner pride certainly wouldn't allow him to admit it. So he went to disturb Caecilian's spellcasting. The young Caecilian was not yet proficient in the newly learned magic. Under the crown prince's interference, he and the crown prince both fell into the valley full of magical beasts. For Caecilian's safety, Charlotte also intervened to save the two who had fallen. He had already investigated the truth of the matter. He hoped the crown prince could admit his mistake and apologize to Caecilian. But the crown prince was obstinate and refused to admit that he and his master had manipulated these magical beasts. Originally, considering his young age, he could still be taught. But the crown prince's lying behavior was very displeasing. Charlotte wouldn't indulge him. He would only save Caecilian. The crown prince, whose protection from Charlotte's magic barrier was revoked, was immediately attacked by the Racnal magical beasts. At the last moment, powerful magic was infused. The Racnal magical beasts were instantly killed. The crown prince was saved from the brink of death, but the fear in his heart told him to admit all his mistakes. At this moment, Caecilian finally realized how powerful his master was. And the story of his master's one strike, killing 9.9 billion Racnal magical beasts, was forever imprinted in Caecilian's heart. Now these magical beasts they summoned. Caecilian also wanted to recreate the scene to confirm the girl's identity. He understood that his master's actions were always reassuring. If the girl was his master, she would definitely kill these magical beasts in one strike. But the girl hadn't made a move yet. The Knights of the Klaus Empire's delegation quickly grabbed Charlotte and ran away. After all, there were too many of these magical beasts. The Mabel Empire people behind them, seeing this, frantically complained that the girl hadn't even made a move yet, and these people had already run away. They had no choice but to chase after Charlotte and the others to escape together. The Klaus group, seeing the fleeing Mabel magicians, also complained that they were all powerful magicians. They actually left their leader, the female knight, alone to cover the rear. The Racnal magical beasts were chasing. Everyone was fleeing. It was like a large-scale prey chase scene. A companion fell. As a comrade, they hesitated but went back to help. At this moment, they were like grasshoppers in a hot wok, jumping around everywhere. The Mabel delegation was even more bizarre. One second they said they had no magic power left. The next second they summoned powerful mounts to escape. Faced with this scene, Charlotte expressed that it was truly unbearable to watch. He understood that these magical beasts were secretly manipulated by his disciple, so he knew that Caecilian could also deal with these magical beasts. But this group of people didn't seem to intend to take action. Charlotte also didn't understand why they were doing this. Under the pursuit of Racnal magical beasts, everyone ran to a hill where the beasts couldn't attack. They finally slowed down and caught their breath. The day Charlotte was suddenly knocked down by a strong tremor. The troublemaking trio reflexively supported Charlotte, who was about to fall. But realizing what they did, they quickly let go. The crown prince also mumbled that he really resembled that person. But Charlotte, being over 100 years old inside, couldn't bear to watch these kids' antics. Meanwhile, the Racnal magical beasts were still trying to destroy the base of the hill. Everyone was at the edge of the cliff. There was truly nowhere to escape. Charlotte had to resort to the last method. He told everyone that there was a super powerful magician here. Hearing Charlotte's words, the Mabel trio widened their eyes. Could it be that the girl was really Lord Charlotte? Was he going to take action? Caecilian also turned his head with ill intent. How are you going to deal with them? Young lady, Charlotte had long wanted to teach this disciple, who kept pretending to be young, a lesson. He walked straight towards Caecilian. Without a word, he kicked him, saying, "Go solve it yourself if you want to pretend." Caecilian hadn't even reacted yet. Everyone was stunned by Charlotte's behavior. This girl was too bold. Caecilian, with a confused face, was kicked flying in the air. What he had been thinking was now even more certain. The young lady had 5 disciples, but none of them gave her peace of mind. As the eldest disciple, Caecilian was kicked off the cliff by Charlotte. Caecilian wasn't angry at all. He was even very happy, because he had once again confirmed the answer in his heart. But as bystanders, the onlookers' eyes were wide open in shock. As the great magician of Mabel, their own king, had been kicked down. Just as they were about to confront Charlotte for an explanation, the ambassador had just grabbed Charlotte. But Charlotte used the momentum to throw him down as well. Until the moment he fell, the ambassador still didn't understand why the girl was so arrogant. But what the ambassador saw on Charlotte's face was a gratified smile. Charlotte then glared at the 2 remaining Mabel people. After 3 seconds, he decided to let them go. After all, in Charlotte's mind, the crown prince was just a kid, and the healing magician had no self-defense ability. Forget it, everyone hadn't yet recovered from Charlotte throwing 2 people off the cliff. But at this moment, a dazzling light burst from below the cliff. A powerful magical force erupted, and the arachnal magical beasts at the foot of the hill were all shattered. Everyone realized that the powerful magician Charlotte had mentioned was actually the 2 people he had just thrown down. At the bottom of the hill, Caecilian was secretly delighted, because at this moment, he had confirmed in his heart that Charlotte was indeed his master. But the ambassador beside him was very confused. What was this unserious king so happy about? Caecilian also told him that this matter could be concluded now. The hill where Charlotte was, due to the attack of the arachnal magical beasts, was about to collapse. Charlotte told everyone to knock down the opposite hill. Using magic to form a new path with the falling rocks, they could leave now. Everyone followed Charlotte's arrangement and began attacking the hill in front of them. The debris also fell towards the arachnal magical beast below due to gravity. Everyone was extremely happy, releasing their pent-up frustration towards the arachnal magical beasts. As one of the parties involved, Charlotte certainly couldn't just stand by and watch. He took out the magic potion he had brought, but after he consumed it, he realized that these weren't magic potions at all. The contents of the bottle were actually the knight's righteousness, something Geoffrey had given him. Unsurprisingly, this must have been Geoffrey's mischief. But Charlotte had no idea. As he used the bottle, Geoffrey, who was far away, felt his power draining. He understood that the bottle he gave Charlotte had been opened. He was very worried about Charlotte, because he had no idea what had happened to Charlotte. He really should have gone along after all. Charlotte now felt his body filled with power. But he also understood that making these concentrated righteousness bottles must have consumed a lot of energy. Charlotte inwardly scolded his old friend who didn't take care of his own body. To prevent Charlotte from using magic, he had done something so detrimental to his own health. Charlotte now transformed into a super strong knight. After all, he was using Geoffrey's righteousness power, which contained his own abilities. But at this moment, a figure appeared in the distance. Charlotte could sense evil power from him. This figure quickly disappeared again. The next second, the figure had already appeared beside Charlotte. This person was Charlotte's 5th disciple, Evan. Charlotte didn't understand why Evan would appear here, but he also had many questions to ask Evan. His sudden appearance now saved him the time of searching for him. The simple-minded knight suddenly grabbed Charlotte. "Miss, why are you drawing my sword?" Evan was a loyal guard dog. Seeing his master being questioned, Evan used his magic to attack him. But Charlotte stopped his action. "What are you doing? Since that's the case, let's have a duel then." Evan told Charlotte that because Charlotte used that old man's blue righteousness, he really disliked it. Charlotte had to ask the male knight beside him to leave temporarily. He needed to talk to his 5th disciple alone. Charlotte swung fiercely at Evan, and Evan kept dodging until they had fought for 2.5 rounds. Evan noticed that his master's power wasn't as strong as before. Charlotte's swinging sword interrupted him. He clenched his fists and punched towards Evan. But this time, Evan didn't dodge, until Charlotte's fist hit him hard. Under the impact, Evan flew out. Charlotte found that his disciple hadn't dodged his attack. He ran over with concern. "Why didn't you dodge?" Charlotte felt very guilty and worried. He comforted Evan, wanting to understand what had happened to Evan over these years. But Evan grabbed his hand, revealing that familiar smile. Memories suddenly echoed in Charlotte's mind. This was the aura of the past Demon King disaster. He hurriedly grabbed Evan's collar tightly. "Who are you really?" "To find his master." The fifth disciple was willing to sacrifice his life. As Charlotte's most outstanding fifth disciple, rumor said he had died 4 years ago, until Charlotte met his disciple again. He slowly realized that his disciple hadn't died, but the aura emanating from Evan was no longer like the disciple he once knew. His magical aura was mixed with the power of the Demon King. "Who are you really?" Evan also spoke provocatively. "Guess." Charlotte was very worried. He remembered what his fourth disciple had told him. From his youth, Evan had never let Charlotte feel at ease. Because of his strong magical talent, he often arrogantly bullied those weaker than him. Charlotte didn't like his behavior. He told Evan that if he continued to bully the weak, he would no longer accept Evan as his disciple. Evan was afraid of losing his master. No one was more important than his master. Under his master's threat, he slowly corrected his bad personality. The fourth disciple, Eldo, who was watching from his room, was also called out by Charlotte. This mischievous one was disguising his identity again. Elwyn angrily walked towards his master. He told his master that Evan always gave him a very ominous feeling. Now Evan was emanating an evil aura. Could Elwyn's prediction be true? Charlotte needed to find out what had happened to Evan. At this moment, a powerful aura burst out behind Evan. It came from Caecilian. Caecilian had dealt with all the magical beasts, and he also noticed Evan nearby. Caecilian told Charlotte that the knights who came with him were all safe now. He dared not provoke his master anymore. Charlotte just wanted to talk to Evan alone. Moreover, Charlotte still thought Caecilian didn't know his identity. Charlotte hurriedly blocked Evan, who knew his identity, fearing he might leak the information to Caecilian. To further confirm his master's identity, Caecilian decided to lead his master and the others to a quiet place. Before they could react, powerful magic gathered in Caecilian's hand. With a loud boom, the powerful magic exploded on the hill. And after the dazzling light, they were brought to a cave blasted out by Caecilian's magic. All this was done to facilitate better conversation with his master. But Charlotte now just wanted to punch him again. This guy was too rude in his actions. Seeing his angry master, Caecilian's voice began to stutter. He hurriedly made up an excuse. Because of Evan's appearance, Caecilian also wanted to have a good talk with him. Because during Charlotte's absence, many things had happened among these problematic disciples. 4 years ago, Evan had stolen a national treasure from Mabel. As the king of Mabel, Caecilian certainly needed an explanation from Evan, but he couldn't find Evan's whereabouts all these years. Now he finally saw him. But these extraordinary geniuses, none of them behaved properly in front of Charlotte. As soon as these two met, they wanted to compete for favor. Neither could stand the other before their master. They started fighting like children. Charlotte, knowing Evan had stolen the heart of Bolgon, couldn't figure out Evan's purpose no matter how he thought about it. But Charlotte also needed to understand Evan's situation clearly. After all, the current Evan had the aura of the Demon King he once fought. If the Demon King were to descend upon the world again, it would be no small matter. But looking at his disciples now, these immature fellows, Evan knew he couldn't stay any longer. He was about to use magic to break free from Caecilian's deadly lock. Caecilian noticed that the fifth disciple was about to use magic. He also warned Evan that using magic might harm the girl in front of them. Evan, who was about to cast a spell, stopped his action upon hearing this. But Caecilian pushed his luck, saying, "For the sake of the young lady, can you obediently come back to Mabel with me?" Evan definitely wouldn't agree. He didn't care anymore. He could only use magic to break free from Caecilian's entanglement. Charlotte also noticed Evan wanting to escape. He still had many things he needed to understand from his disciple. But Evan ignored Charlotte's calls. He raised his hand, then offered a passionate kiss. "Until we meet again." Charlotte stood there bewildered. The eldest disciple also slowly got up. After all, Caecilian had completely confirmed the identity of the young lady before him in his heart, and he wanted to take his master back to the country of Mabel. The young lady had 5 disciples, each one an unruly character. Just because of her death, they turned everything upside down. Now that the young lady had been reborn and returned, the disciples gradually discovered their master's whereabouts. To break free from Caecilian's entanglement, Evan cast a spell at him. The cave was already unstable. With Evan's actions, the cave collapsed. At this moment, only Caecilian and Charlotte remained. They had to temporarily maintain the cave's space with magic. And it was here that Caecilian truly confirmed his master's identity. Caecilian recalled when he was searching for his master. He used magic to see his master's final moments. His master's face wore a happy smile. At that moment, he began to reflect on himself. Perhaps the master felt too tired of leading them. So the departed master was freed from this exhausting life. After all, when the master was alive, he was always busy for his disciples. But Caecilian couldn't accept this way of saying goodbye from his master. Even though he understood that his master had passed away, his heart still couldn't let go of his master. So he believed his master must still be alive. After all, his master was the most powerful great magician. So he never announced the news of his master's death to outsiders. He felt very guilty inside, having 5 disciples, yet not one of them could give the master peace of mind. Faced with Caecilian's self-blame, Charlotte couldn't hold back anymore. Over these years, how much hardship had the disciples endured? He told Caecilian that he didn't regret taking them as disciples. After all, it was the disciples' existence that made his previous life meaningful. And at this moment, Caecilian finally truly confirmed his master's identity. Caecilian now expressed that in this life, he would be his master's support, no longer letting his master live the exhausting life of before. Caecilian wanted to take his master back to the country of Mabel. And Charlotte also told Caecilian that they couldn't let their guard down. He understood his eldest disciple's good intentions, but hiding behind his disciple wasn't Charlotte's style. Moreover, Evan now emanated an aura of disaster. He feared that the old evil might resurface, and he couldn't just sit and wait for destruction. Until the two left the cave, they found that outside was already full of people. The Mabel Knight delegation outside, not knowing the specific reason, was scared and thought a war was about to break out. The female knight commander, already full of grievances, also ran fiercely to Caecilian's side. Now that all the magical beasts had been eliminated, they could finally properly greet the Mabel representative delegation. She clamored for an explanation from their king, and Caecilian, at this moment, no longer disguised his identity as the king of Mabel, when his true identity was once again revealed to everyone. The soldiers of Mabel all knelt down in salute. The Knights of Klaus also realized what was happening. Unexpectedly, all this was the doing of the king of Mabel. But under his master's supervision, Caecilian couldn't cause any more trouble. He offered a sincere apology to everyone. He didn't want the relationship between the two countries to worsen because of this. The scene changes. Under Caecilian's lead, everyone returned to the royal city of Mabel. The Klaus delegation couldn't understand the situation. After all, only Caecilian and a few close to him knew about finding the master. But as soon as Charlotte arrived at the royal city, Caecilian made arrangements. First, he had the maids prepare a set of the great magician's clothes that Charlotte used to wear. Charlotte certainly refused. But it must be said, Caecilian's tactics were one after another. The entire castle was covered with portraits of the master. Wherever Charlotte went, these portraits of his former self were everywhere. But Charlotte clearly remembered that the day before his death, he had secretly destroyed all these portraits. Now they were hung up again, and the guide ambassador was very angry. He was also a loyal fan of Charlotte, but during these years of Charlotte's disappearance, countless people had pretended to be Charlotte. As the person responsible for finding Charlotte, he had long been tired of these people. He didn't believe that the current Charlotte was the former great magician. Charlotte wasn't angry and smiled at him reassuringly. He thought to himself that the vigilance was good, and it seemed Caecilian had some capable assistants around him. Under his guidance, Charlotte arrived at Caecilian's room, and Caecilian, as the king of Mabel, had an important announcement to make. Caecilian brought Charlotte to the ceremonial hall. He wanted to announce important news to everyone. This girl, Elia Allison, in everyone's eyes. He now officially announced that the girl was his master, the great magician's 6th disciple. And Charlotte now gained a new identity, becoming the disciple's little 6. She also had 5 disciples. Each disciple adored their master. Until the moment the girl died, the disciples began to disappear from the world, and their purpose was only to find their master. Until the resurrected girl was recognized by the eldest disciple. Charlotte was willing to appear in public as the 6th disciple, but the 5 disciples he took in were all strange people. The relationship between them wasn't peaceful. but their love for their master was unanimous. As Charlotte's most outstanding fifth disciple, Evan had become involved with the Demon King. He even stole the national treasure of Cassilian's country. During this time, Cassilian had also investigated Evan, but rumors said that after Evan stole the heart of Bulgan, he died in the Kabilon Mountains. But the supposedly dead Evan appeared again before Charlotte. And now, he had become involved with the evil that once destroyed humanity. To reassure his master, Cassilian promised him that he would do his best to capture him. But Charlotte had his own thoughts. He understood that many things needed to be done by himself. And in the royal palace, he received important news. The news came from Charlotte's friend Jeffrey. He had someone secretly pass a communication ring to Charlotte, and Jeffrey on the other end of the ring told Charlotte. Charlotte's second disciple, Julian, had been found, and in a certain part of the city, a blonde, blue-eyed woman was following a man. The woman called the man Master. The woman was Julian, Charlotte's second disciple. Under the man's command, Julian followed him to steal something called a magic crystal. The leading man tried to get Julian to attack the shop owner. At this moment, a shiny golden bird caught Julian's attention. She felt the bird was somehow very familiar. Ignoring the man's calls, she followed the bird outside. The bird's final resting place was on the head of Charlotte, who had arrived there, just as Charlotte received news of Julian's whereabouts. He came here following Jeffrey's information. Julian approached Charlotte, but she didn't seem to recognize him. Her gaze was fixed on the golden bird. Charlotte panicked and quickly grabbed his second disciple, shouting, "Julian!" Julian turned her head, but there was no emotion in her eyes. She told Charlotte that she wasn't Julian, and that he had mistaken her for someone else. Charlotte now realized the problem. His second disciple really didn't seem to know him. Charlotte wanted to clarify everything. He hurried back to the palace where Cassilian smilingly asked, "Master, where did you go just now?" This clingy fellow, while negotiating with important people in the royal court, didn't forget to monitor his master's situation. Fearing that his master might escape again, every 10 minutes, he had the ambassador check if Charlotte was in his room. Just because Charlotte went to look for Julian, he worried about his master's whereabouts. Charlotte glared at him irritably. "Do I need to report everything to you?" Afraid that even another fart would earn him a beating, Charlotte wanted to learn about Julian from Cassilian. Hearing this, Cassilian was about to run away. Charlotte softly uttered 2 words, "Sit down." Cassilian fearfully sat back down. Charlotte told Cassilian that he had seen Julian, but Cassilian was very surprised. He slowly said, "Is she still alive?" Julian had a nightmare every time she closed her eyes, and in the dream was her master. Because the master had been missing for 8 years, she missed him very much. Not being able to see her master now, she was in great pain, but memories with her master often lingered in her dreams, haunting her. She could only live in the pain of missing her master. Perhaps due to excessive longing for her master, Julian mistook the man for her master. Charlotte was very confused about this. To find out the truth, Charlotte inquired of his eldest disciple, who was now king. But Cassilian's words shocked Charlotte again. "Is she still alive?" This statement left Charlotte bewildered. He urgently asked Cassilian to tell him everything he knew about Julian. Cassilian honestly told his master during Charlotte's disappearance. Julian, in an attempt to see her master, had once destroyed half of the Pantom Forest. Cassilian had tried to go there to search for Julian, but Julian was the guardian spirit of the Pantom Forest. Without her permission, humans couldn't enter. He gathered some information from other spirits. They all said the guardian was gone, having fallen into a deep sleep due to exhaustion. After hearing the explanation, Charlotte slowly calmed down. It seemed Cassilian only thought Julian had died, but as the guardian of the Pantera Forest, she couldn't destroy the forest. After that, Cassilian had also organized magicians to investigate. His investigation results led Cassilian to speculate that Julian might have used time reversal magic. But this magic was extremely difficult to perform. These disciples never gave him peace of mind. In a corner of the city, Julian found that man again. She still called him Master. The man scolded her for suddenly leaving earlier. Not satisfied with just scolding, he slapped Julian. But Julian didn't get angry. She looked at the man's wound, feeling very distressed. The man said he would use healing magic to cure her. The man continued to deceive Julian. "Only when I recover my memories can I help you regain yours." Night fell, Because of Julian's sudden departure during the day, the man took Julian back to the magic shop from earlier. This time he asked Julian to subdue the shop owner, just to find his magic crystal. After stealing the crystal, the man viciously threatened the shop owner. Then he fled with Julian. At this moment, Charlotte suddenly appeared. He had anticipated that the man impersonating him would return, so he had arranged with the shop owner to give them a fake magic crystal until the man and Julian returned to their lodging place. Charlotte followed the position of the magic whale, but due to his reborn body, he was no longer as strong as before. In his weakened state, he could sense this was no longer Mabel's territory. The long-distance teleportation had also greatly depleted Charlotte's magical power. Charlotte noticed the man resting nearby. Since Julian called him master, Charlotte curiously approached, wondering how the man resembled him at all. The man suddenly opened his eyes, startling Charlotte. Before he could react, Charlotte instinctively punched him. The man fainted again. But at this moment, Julian suddenly appeared behind Charlotte. She remembered Charlotte as the girl she met earlier that day. But Julian looked at the unconscious man, worried about her master. She then inquired about Charlotte's true identity. Before Charlotte could answer, Julian had already cast her magic. Charlotte slowly undid Julian's spell. He approached her and gently told Julian again. Julian looked carefully. "I am your master," to find her deceased master. The disciple Julian had destroyed half of the magic forest she guarded, just to see him one more time. Encountering someone similar to her master, she'd rather believe he was alive than think the imposter was fake. Until her master, who had been in hiding, appeared again, grabbing the out-of-control Julian. "I am your master." But during her search for him, Julian's mind had already become confused. She immediately locked Charlotte in a magic prison. The new master directly stated he didn't know her. Charlotte had no choice but to indulge his lovely disciple, deciding to help her regain her memories step by step. "Julian, come back. I am your real master." She couldn't hear. Only Charlotte's powerless cries echoed in the cold magic prison. Alone, Charlotte had to reflect. It seemed that during the years he was gone, his disciples had all suffered to varying degrees. At least they were all alive. During his time in the cell, Julian would secretly come to see him. "Here's a blanket. Don't catch a cold. I don't want to treat you." After handing things over, she would scurry away. Charlotte wanted so much to have a good talk with her. He hoped to awaken Julian's dormant memories through their past experiences. But soon Julian came again, this time with hot food. "Eat quickly. Don't ask me for food later." Charlotte eagerly put on his eye patch at this moment. He hoped to awaken Julian through his former appearance. "Julian, look at me. I'm different now." In the time that followed, Julian kept coming to visit him, each time bringing different things, hoping Charlotte would be more comfortable here. Unknowingly, the cold cell had become a proper girl's room. Even so, they still couldn't recognize each other as expected. This was perhaps the greatest punishment for Charlotte. But now his primary concern was to help Julian leave that evil imposter. Charlotte slightly raised his left hand. The powerful confinement magic array crumbled like powder. After all, he was the one who originally created this array. Meanwhile, the third disciple, Danmont, also arrived here, accompanied by his subordinate, Gilhart. Their purpose in coming here was to uncover the truth about those who had impersonated them. It turned out these imposters not only damaged their Black Club's image, but also imprisoned many humans here. Charlotte, who escaped from his cell, was also exploring this place. Cell after cell stacked up. He was sharing this information with Jeffrey through their mental link. At this time, the sound of wheels echoed in the corridor. Charlotte quickly used magic to conceal his presence. A group of people appeared in the corridor. It was the city guards. They seemed to be detaining someone. The eyes peering through the iron cage were as fierce as a beast's. Upon closer inspection, Charlotte realized it was his third disciple, that rascal Danmont. How could a high-level grand magician like him be captured? As the detention cart passed by the invisible Charlotte, Danmont's expression suddenly changed. He looked towards Charlotte's hidden position. "Isn't that Master? How is he here too?" "Master, Master, how are you here too? Can you see me?" Noticing his boss's commotion, Gilhart turned to look back. Sensing the magical power, he approached Charlotte's position. "Am I seeing things?" Gilhart muttered to himself while reaching out to touch. "No, there's really someone here." Charlotte had no choice but to withdraw his magic, slowly revealing himself. At the same time, Julian was lying to the fake master elsewhere. She didn't tell him about imprisoning Charlotte. After the fake master left, Julian rushed back to Charlotte's cell. That's when she discovered Charlotte had escaped. To help Julian regain her memory, Charlotte was now asking Gilhard for that eye patch, the one they used to make people wear who looked similar to him when searching for him. He hoped this eye patch he once wore could better awaken his second disciple. A violent shake suddenly struck. It seemed Julian was causing a commotion while searching for Charlotte. From Gilhardt's words, he learned that Danmont had deliberately gotten caught to quickly reach the basement. That's where the captured people were being held. To prevent Julian and Danmont from fighting when they met, Charlotte's primary task now was to find their location. Before he could find them, Julian appeared at Danmont's location. She slowly approached the detention cart. "Have you seen a petite woman with golden pupils and light golden long hair? Her voice is very gentle. I'm looking for her. If you find her, you absolutely must not harm her." At this moment, her eyes glanced to the side. She also saw Danmont locked in the cage. In that instant of eye contact, Danmont recognized the disguised Julian. But Julian, with her confused memories, didn't recognize him. "Such a stupid-looking face couldn't possibly be who I'm looking for," she said, and turned to leave. Danmont now understood why his master had come here. He unconsciously said, "So master came here for her." Hearing Danmont's words, Julian whipped her head back. "What do you mean by that?" Disciples jealous of their master's attention wouldn't reveal the master's true information. Julian's powerful magic immediately burst from her body, violently knocking the cage to the ground. "You'd better explain clearly, or I won't let you off." Seeing Julian so upset, Danmont seemed to guess the situation. He also sternly warned Julian, "You'd better come to your senses. Don't do something you'll regret." Emotion. At this moment, flashes of images appeared in her mind. It was Danmont as a child. He was leaning against Charlotte. Julian would always deliberately cover his head. After calming down, Julian immediately asked Danmont, "Were you only this big before?" She was about to tell her master, which completely confused Danmont. "The master you're talking about now is definitely not my master." Hearing the word master, both seemed to trigger a key word. They immediately started arguing like little kids. "That's my master." "No, it's not your master." "It's not my master. He's been my master since I was born." "Well, he's been my master since the universe was created." As the two argued without resolution, a powerful tremor caught their attention. It turned out to be the commotion caused by Gilhard on the other side. This made Charlotte complain frantically. "I told you to dispel the magic array here. Why are you smashing the wall? That's a 5-layer overlapping array. I'm not as skilled as the boss. I can only forcibly break it." But Gilhard also realized that the basement entrance his boss had trouble finding, this woman in front of him found in an instant. As expected of Charlotte's sixth disciple, Gilhard felt like he was meeting an idol. But at this moment, the air rippled with magic. It was Julian who had found her way here based on the earlier commotion. Knowing he couldn't win, Gilhard immediately played dead on the spot. Charlotte, to avoid conflict, subsequently entered the cell where the captured people were held. Julian was startled by Charlotte's movement. She slowly approached him and asked, "Someone who looks so weak, yet easily broke through the magic array I set. Who exactly are you?" Charlotte knew this was the moment to explain things clearly to her. "Julian, do you really think that evil person is your master?" The young girl had 5 genius disciples. Each disciple hoped to find their deceased master. But no matter how they searched, they ultimately couldn't find any trace of their master, until the master reappeared years later, only to discover that the disciples had undergone earth-shattering changes. The second disciple, unable to find the vanished master, eventually broke down, leading to mental instability. He lost his former memories. Even when seeing his master again, he couldn't fully recognize him. When Julian lost his memories, only one thought remained in his mind. He must find that person, someone incredibly important to him, his master. Just as his belief was crumbling, a man impersonating his master appeared before him. Only because he had similar physical features to Charlotte, Julian mistook the man for his master. Until Charlotte truly appeared, he couldn't wake up from this delusion. "Do you really think that evil person is your master?" Julian, deceiving himself, said, "Master must have his reasons. Time will prove everything. My master couldn't possibly deceive me." Charlotte fell silent. After all, it was because of his disappearance that his disciple had become like this. It seemed his previous belief that the disciples would become better even without him was wrong. At this moment, rumbling footsteps approached from outside. The patrolling guards outside, hearing the commotion, we're coming this way. Fortunately, thanks to Julian's quick talking, they didn't pay much attention. But meanwhile, on the other side, that imposter was plotting a secret unknown to others. He was seen throwing magic crystals into a refining device, muttering constantly, "Even magic crystals are useless now? I've already used so many." A man responded to him, "Magic crystals no longer satisfy him. He needs more powerful energy, like from a grand mage or someone similar." The man, just learning of the commotion outside, left this place. When he reappeared, he had already arrived where Charlotte and the others were. He inquired about the situation here from his subordinates. The subordinate truthfully reported that there might be other intruders here. "Did you hear that, Riel? Why are you still standing there? Go catch them quickly." The man glared fiercely at Julian in the distance. Seeing Julian motionless, he lowered his voice. "Is there someone behind you?" Seeing Julian still not moving, he gestured and said, "Move aside." But Julian calmly said, "Master, I remembered something. I recall you sleeping with a child once. I was there too." Julian tried to get the truth from the one he now believed to be his master. But the impostor paid no attention to Julian's inquiry. He fiercely ordered, "I told you to move aside. This is an order." A heavy slap landed on Julian's face. The sound of the slap echoed throughout the prison. "I told you to move aside. Didn't you hear me?" Julian didn't resist. But as his master, how could Charlotte stand by and watch coldly? He vanished from the cell in an instant. When the golden light appeared again, Charlotte's figure had already arrived outside the cell. The impostor was forcefully pinned to the ground by Charlotte. All the surrounding guards were also casually immobilized by him. "You wet behind the ears brat. How dare you bully my disciple?" A 16-year-old girl gets married for the first time, having to bear the burden of her race, marrying a man she doesn't love. However, entrusting her fate to her race, the girl is rewarded with betrayal. In the end, it was the master's appearance that saved her from this miserable life. "Hello, we just met, didn't we?" This was their first encounter. Charlotte extended a helping hand to Julian. With one question, she probed the deepest answer in his heart. "You clearly don't like this marriage. Why did you agree to it? Didn't you come here to see the guardian of the Phantom Forest? The marriage has nothing to do with you." Charlotte ignored his words and continued to lean her whole body closer. "So why is it you?" That leader became the guardian of Pantom. After saying this, she vanished in a flash of golden light, leaving a bewildered Julian to ponder alone. However, shortly after Charlotte left, Julian's leader appeared. He brought a pot of hot tea, claiming it was to help Julian sleep, but in reality, the tea contained a drug to keep him unconscious. Julian had no suspicions towards him. He gulped down the tea in one go. When he woke up again, he heard whispers around him. From their words, he learned that the person he was forced to marry actually had a terminal illness. The main reason for marrying Julian was to use him as a medicine to prolong his own life. Learning this news, Julian was furious. Then the man's next words shocked Julian even more. It turned out their true intention was to turn the elves into slaves, not to bring peace between the two sides. He swung a heavy punch at the arrogant man. Fighting against the strong effects of the drug, he tried to report this news to his people. Julian, who hadn't run far, quickly encountered the leader. But after telling him everything, Julian realized that his leader was the mastermind. He knew the truth all along. Julian himself was just a bargaining chip, used to exchange for the happiness of some of their people. Sacrificing one person to let others achieve the life they desire. Why not? Julian was unwilling. But after being drugged again, he closed his eyes once more. When he woke up, he was already in shackles. Fortunately, these simple magic locks were no challenge for him. With his own powerful abilities, Julian broke free from the shackles and escaped to the window. Reaching the window, he realized there was no way out. He was being held in the highest building. In his weakened state, falling would mean certain death. Remembering how he wholeheartedly wanted to improve his clan, only to be abandoned by them. If he were caught now, endless torture would await him. Julian felt utterly helpless. He didn't know what to do. Just when he was at his most desperate, a gentle voice came from below. "Jump down. Don't worry. I'll catch you." Julian, who had fallen into darkness, finally saw a ray of light shining for him. With Charlotte's gentle calls, Julian chose to jump. Then, a powerful golden light transformed into soaring wings, safely bringing Julian down from the air. Very good, you did excellently. Charlotte slowly helped him down. To get the seed of the Panem Forest, I left for just a moment. Had I known this would happen, I should have stayed by your side. At this moment, the group pursuing Julian also arrived. Now with his master protecting him, he was no longer someone anyone could bully. Charlotte told Julian that becoming the guardian of Panem wasn't something one could just decide to do. There was only one condition for becoming one. That was to gain the approval of the Panem Forest seed. Charlotte placed the seed in his hand. Soon, powerful elven power burst forth from within Julian. The new, true guardian of the Panem Forest was born. Only then did the former leader realize that he had never truly become the guardian. Now, the true guardian of the Panem Forest was being born right before his eyes. Those evildoers still hadn't changed their ways, vowing to fight Charlotte's group to the death. Poor fools. They had no idea that standing before them was the most powerful magician who once saved the entire continent, the very being they had always revered. Lord Eleanor, do you want to reveal your identity? No need. We don't even have to lift a finger here. Under the powerful elven force, everyone is under Julian's firm control. Those who once tried to frame him all met their end here. After everything was over, Julian quietly sat on a rock. It felt as if half of his life had been emptied. As he faced an uncertain future, Charlotte approached and draped her cloak over his head. It's all right, everything's over now. Julian, I know a wonderful place. The sky there is more beautiful than here, the environment is better, and it's a vast forest. Just as Charlotte was about to leave, she suddenly realized that Julian had, at some point, quietly tied himself to her. Looking closely, she saw he was secretly crying. It seems this experience had truly shaken him. Charlotte continued, Julian, if you're willing, would you like to come with me? Julian agreed without hesitation. From then on, he began his new life. Eventually, he became Charlotte's second disciple. But now, he had forgotten all these past events. He mistook an impostor for his master. Seeing her disciple being bullied, Charlotte wasted no time and pinned the impostor to the ground. The familiar voice and appearance, along with that warm golden magic, finally awakened Julian's dormant memories. At this moment, she also lowered the bow and arrow she had raised. The arrow quickly flew out. As the persistent impostor was shot down, no one can bully my master. The brown hair turned back to golden. Julian revealed his true appearance. He hugged Charlotte tightly. His master had finally returned. Master, I've missed you so much. The sage had 5 genius disciples, mastering the world's strongest magic. She was revered by everyone. Yet after death, she was rejected by magic and resurrected as a single virgin. And those 5 genius disciples of hers, during her absence, had turned the world upside down. The main reason for this was to find her. Until a dozen years later, Charlotte reappeared. She had no choice but to clean up the mess they had made. Learning of evil's presence here, Charlotte came to investigate. She successfully awakened her elven disciple, Julian. After their commotion, everyone in the mansion was alerted. Gilhart, of the Black Peak faction, had to come back from playing dead. What he needed to do now was to protect the young lady his boss valued, and not let Charlotte be disturbed by small fry. He yanked up the imposter shot down by Julian. They don't even recognize you as a servant. Why are you still so stubborn? At this moment, a cry for help came from afar. A small fry rushed over, shouting. Gilhart and Charlotte instinctively turned their heads. A huge monster leaped out in front of them, with a foolish Danmont in its mouth. Danmont also turned his face, just in time to see Charlotte embracing the teary-eyed Julian. Unexpectedly, he immediately opened a spatial transfer. He immediately disappeared from the monster's mouth. The next second, he appeared beside Charlotte. His eyes stared blankly at his master. The jealous big wolf dog decided not to fight, but to join in the reunion with the master. Before they could properly catch up, the big monster came to interfere. Master, please wait. There's a dirty thing with poor judgment here. Let us deal with it before we continue our chat. Damont's next words reminded Charlotte of something. He said the monster before them was transformed from a human, and it was an old acquaintance. Since it was an old acquaintance, Julian also wanted to greet it properly. Powerful elven force was released, and magical vines filled the sky, binding the monster. The battle between them grew more intense. The monster before them was no longer the small fry Cubami. With a forceful twist, Julian's advanced magic was broken. Charlotte watched quietly from the side, her mind working rapidly. She firmly believed that her 5th disciple couldn't have turned into the monster before her. but everything happening must be related to Evan. Therefore, Evan must be nearby. The monster attacked Charlotte. Just as its claws were about to reach her, a powerful force swept in from nearby, cutting the monster's claw in half. It was Evan, Charlotte's fifth disciple, who appeared. The big monster immediately revealed its true form. Finally turning into human form, it stood beside Evan. A chuckling laugh echoed in their ears. That was quite harsh. My poor right arm. On the other side, Charlotte's trio also reacted. Damon immediately questioned Evan. Why are you here? And that strange fellow who appeared in Aventa before. What have you been doing all this time, Evan? Now, this small mansion gathered the most powerful magician and 3 of his disciples. The mysterious person grinned and continued to chuckle, big and small. The next second, he was struck by Julian's magic sword. The master gave a low command, and the two immediately assumed battle stances again. With a whoosh, the mysterious person was hammered away by Danmont. Let you chuckle. Hurry up and confess everything obediently. Then you can go die. Charlotte asked Julian beside her. Have you seen Evan here before? Julian told his master that this was the first time he had seen him since being here. Meanwhile, Charlotte's footsteps moved closer to Evan, step by step. Then Evan, do you know everything that happened here? Including Julian being deceived and humans being captured. But Evan didn't answer. He directly told his master that what they were looking for was right under their feet. This troublesome guy was still so troublesome. Charlotte reached out to him. It's not too late to turn back now. I will help you solve everything that's happening to you, Evan. The usually frantic Evan only remained calm for a moment. He immediately grabbed Charlotte's outstretched hand. I hope your hand will only reach out to me alone. Julian behind them got jealous and angrily shouted, "Let go of Master!" Evan pulled the Master into his arms, making her blush and dodge away. But what he said next completely awakened Charlotte. If I say that everything here was orchestrated by me, would you forgive me? Would you hate me? Answer me quickly. The Master felt this familiar sensation. Wasn't that the aura of evil from before? And her Evan would never call her Master in front of her. Finding the Master, he paid with his own life. Yet their reunion was to be a bloody battle. Only because the Master once again sensed from Evan the power that once destroyed the continent. Evan never calls me Master. Golden magic exploded. Charlotte struggled free from Evan's embrace. This powerful magical disturbance also made Julian extremely worried. A huge roar was heard. The mysterious person was stomped to the ground by a large foot. It was Danmont, who had quickly resolved the battle on his side. The next second, his fierce gaze turned towards Evan's position, indicating his anger at Evan's earlier action of pulling the Master into his arms. Charlotte interrupted their conversation, continuing to question Evan about the evil information. When you said what I was looking for is right below, what did you mean? Evan looked at his right hand that the Master had held, falling into a brief contemplation. You've been searching for traces of evil, right? It's actually fragments pieced together from evil remnants, mixed with the greedy power of foolish believers. Since you wanted it, I had to bring it up for you. Among these, it contains the power of the evil that once destroyed the world. Its emanating aura, even great magicians like them feel uncomfortable, let alone ordinary humans. The suffocating feeling instilled fear in them. Under Charlotte's arrangement, Julian and Danmont were responsible for protecting the humans, while she alone had to bring Evan back to the good side. I ask you, what do you want with that? Evan, having successfully caught the Master's attention, smiled wickedly. This? Why don't you guess? However, the next second, his raised smile instantly vanished, his eyes revealing endless worry. At the same time, Julian and Danmont also suddenly staggered. It turned out that Charlotte, having released too much magic earlier, her body couldn't withstand such consumption. Charlotte, struck by the backlash, fainted the next second. Meanwhile, on the other side, Jeffrey, who was searching for Charlotte, also suddenly jolted. He, who had secretly bound a contract magic with Charlotte, also suffered equal damage. Clearly, he knew Charlotte's current condition was not good. He immediately burst into Charlotte's eldest disciple, Cassilian's office. Please activate the magic teleportation array immediately. We can't wait any longer. Charlotte slowly regained consciousness at this time. She was taken outside. From Gilbert's words, she learned that at the moment she fainted, Evan rushed towards her like a madman, but was stopped by Danmont and Julian. Now they were fighting fiercely. Soon they fought from inside to outside. Evan, blasted into the air, also noticed the awakened Master. His eyes, previously blood red, returned to normal. Gilbert hurriedly called for Charlotte to escape. "Run, miss." But Charlotte, with her grand concern for the world, couldn't let that fragment emitting evil aura exist in the world. Otherwise, it would surely harm the continent. The current Evans certainly wouldn't put it away voluntarily. The only solution she could think of was to seal it. But now her magic power couldn't release such powerful magic. This was the first time she felt so powerless. At this moment, a magic array's portal opened behind her. It was from Jeffrey. He reproached Charlotte for her reckless actions. "You're clearly not alone. Why do you always think of bearing everything by yourself? Everyone here can become your magic. Your sword." Strong righteousness transformed into a sword aura, sweeping out from Jeffrey's body. Those small monsters that had just crawled out were directly eliminated. "You can call on me anytime. I don't mind being a bit rough." This sudden cheesy dialogue made the subordinates nearby both moved and cringed. The usually cold Grand Duke towards women also had such a flirtatious side. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battle, they also noticed the commotion on Charlotte's side. "Looks like reinforcements I don't like have arrived." Jeffrey turned to question Evan. "I don't know what you're planning, but I know this. Even if you've come back from the dead, you can never defeat your master. As the world's strongest Grand Magician, she single-handedly protected the entire continent. Yet she disappeared from people's sight until the power of evil resurfaced. This girl, revered by everyone on the continent, has once again returned to everyone's view. The evil fragment activated by Evan was emitting its terrifying power in the air. Jeffrey, who came as reinforcement, also joined Charlotte's team. Charlotte wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth, deciding to personally seal this fragment containing evil power. As for her disobedient fifth disciple, she left him for Jeffrey to deal with. Damont, beaten by Evan, was furious. "You bastard, are you getting serious?" As long as Evan was near this evil fragment, his power could become stronger. "Help me restrain Evan. Keep him away from that power. I will seal that power." But Charlotte's current magic power couldn't sustain such powerful magic. Therefore, she needed help from others. Charlotte approached Belmont, asking for the magic mirror to replenish her magic power. Belmont was still fighting with relish. The master called him once, and the next second he instantly appeared by her side. As for Evan, Jeffrey could handle him. Finally, a chance to teach you a lesson fair and square. The battle between them was about to erupt. Jeffrey raised his sword, with powerful righteousness gathering in his hand. He teleported right in front of Evan. "Actually, I disliked you from the first time I saw you." The powerful sword aura shook the entire space. Even the flow of magic power changed. Charlotte gathered the entire team, methodically assigning tasks to everyone. The royal magicians were responsible for casting the magic array. Gilbert and others were in charge of eliminating newly emerged monsters. Damont was responsible for helping to contain that power. Soon, a powerful magic array appeared beneath Charlotte's feet. Everyone was responsible for standing in a specific place, providing strong magic power for Charlotte's spell. This powerful array was something even Belmont, a high-level magician, had never seen before. This wasn't something one could learn just by reading a few textbooks. At this moment, he finally understood why the Grand Duke could be so respectful to her, and why those disciples of Charlotte, who were several times stronger than him, all obeyed her. This was no sixth disciple of Charlotte. Even he, who had been kept in the dark, could realize that the girl before him was none other than the Charlotte he had always revered. Charlotte's magic array was rapidly deploying. Everyone's magic power flowed through the array, continuously pouring into her. The complexity and strength of the array once again shocked everyone. The magicians within could only keep marveling while ensuring they made no mistakes, contributing their power as much as possible. The sealing method varies depending on what is being sealed. For the colossal entity before them, Charlotte needed to prepare a channel. Finally, guide it into the sealing chamber. Only then could it be truly sealed. Fortunately, the royal magicians of Mabel were quite skilled. Charlotte's super strong array was also smoothly executed. A powerful beam of light opened from the array. The strong sealing magic directly attracted the evil fragment in. After completing all this, Pfeffer's physical condition still couldn't keep up with Charlotte's consumption. As she turned around, she noticed Belmont, observing his strong intuition and skilled magic practice. She thought, this child might become a new Grand Magician in the future. So she chose to entrust the remaining finishing work to Belmont in the array. Belmont noticed Charlotte. Seeing her, he became nervous, his heart racing. Suddenly, Charlotte charged towards him with great momentum. Frightened, Belmont couldn't help but reflect on himself. Was he being held accountable for once saying he wasn't Lady Charlotte's nephew? There was a whoosh sound. The imposter was directly blasted away by Charlotte. It turned out that this sixth one wanted to sneak attack. For this unrepentant fellow, Charlotte decided to teach him a good lesson. The young woman had 5 genius disciples. Each disciple became a powerful existence in the world. To find their deceased master, the 5th disciple even risked his own life. Charlotte, who reappeared now, pinned down the person impersonating her. She decided to teach him a good lesson. With just a wooden stick, you still want to harm others? You should know better and find a chance to quietly escape. But you're still unrepentant coming back again. This guy seemed to not yet realize the seriousness of the situation. He had just snuck away, intending to get that evil power to take revenge on Charlotte. Unexpectedly, before he could get it, Evan had directly taken it. The unlucky guy only realized when he came up that the power he craved was already controlled by Evan. Observing from afar, he also learned Charlotte's true identity. He wanted to sneak attack, but was caught by Charlotte again. The imposter begged pitifully, "Please give Yuri back to me. You don't lack anything anyway. Just give him to me for 2 years. I'll return him to you then. I really need him." This childish request directly angered Charlotte. Yuri is a person, not an object. No one can decide where he goes. Even if Yuri sees you again, he'll definitely come to settle scores with you. Stop daydreaming. But a strange aura emanated from the imposter. Grand Magician, so you're still alive? You look so pitiful now. The imposter's appearance changed. His pupils emitted an uncomfortable aura. He laughed stutteringly. That person has already been resurrected. What person? Explain clearly. And who exactly are you? During Evan's youth, his personality was like that of a beast, full of wildness. He would fight anyone he disliked. Because of this, Evan with his bad temper was always disliked. Only Charlotte chose to accept this young man, giving him a chance at redemption, letting him walk out of his lonely life. And Evan, who sneered at everyone else, was only loyal to his master Charlotte, following her like a little dog. The gentle Charlotte was like an old mother, patiently teaching him how to be a person. She cut his long black hair for him, successfully taming him. Evan also became Charlotte's 5th disciple. However, Evan never called Charlotte master, always directly calling her by name. Before taking Evan as a disciple, the Fairy King had warned Charlotte that she would regret taking him as her disciple in the future. Even Jeffrey hoped she would consider carefully. This 5th disciple might bring her trouble. Charlotte followed her own thoughts. If she couldn't save even such a young man, how could she deserve the title of the world's strongest Grand Magician? But now Evan reappeared, and Charlotte sensed an evil aura from him. The brat even told her directly that he wasn't Evan. Could the prophecy from back then really come true? But in reality, whenever Charlotte was in danger, Evan would always check on the situation regardless of everything else. And those who harmed Charlotte, he would absolutely not let them off. Charlotte thus concluded that the current Evan must be him. It couldn't be, as the rumors suggested. But now this mysterious person who suddenly appeared, every word he said, made Charlotte's suspicions seem more real. Meanwhile, on the other side, Evan and Jeffrey were fighting fiercely. After all, it was the Empire's strongest night. Evan, under Jeffrey's pressure, was also being beaten and could hardly fight back. "Are you alright?" Purple-black power emanated from Evan's feet. The magic power directly transformed into a dragon shape, rushing towards Jeffrey's direction. "Unscathed, I see. Looks like I need to take this seriously. As long as I don't injure you too severely, you won't be angry, right?" Jeffrey swung his sword. Strong, righteous energy entwined his weapon. He swung forward, and all the righteous energy transformed into sword energy, directly splitting Evan's magic power in half. Evan took this chance to rush over, continuing to attack Jeffrey. Jeffrey quickly reacted, swinging his sword again to split Evan's magic power. He leaped towards Evan again, continuing to counterattack. But Evan wasn't weak either. He used spatial teleportation to dodge Jeffrey's attack. But when he teleported behind Jeffrey again, unexpectedly, Jeffrey directly threw away his sword, firmly caught him, and finally gave him a heavy punch. After a series of fights, the two gradually determined the winner. Jeffrey pointed his sword at Evan, persuading, "You've lost. Surrender quickly. If we continue fighting, you'll only get more injured, and more innocent people will be harmed." Evan still didn't give up. Strong power continued to emanate from him. "I'm telling you, old man, why are you so annoying? Why won't you die?" However, the next second, a scar inexplicably appeared on Jeffrey's face. This directly stunned Evan. He hadn't done anything. Only Jeffrey knew that this was Charlotte's injury synchronized to him. On Charlotte's side, magical beasts appeared frantically again. Charlotte kept questioning the mysterious person. "Who exactly is this master you're talking about?" Seeing the man unable to speak for a long time, Charlotte realized, "Oh, I'm pressing you so you can't speak." She loosened her grip a bit. "Now, can you speak?" The released imposter gasped and coughed violently. "This body is really useless." He continued to mock Charlotte. "Grand Magician, you should know better than me. That master, you killed him with your own hands and then took him in. Charlotte, you've long lost your former heroism. A new world will open soon. That master will become the ruler of the entire world. And now you go and die." Saying this, the imposter grasped the magic cocoon in his hand, wanting to directly take Charlotte's life to assist in the resurrection of the great Demon King. This sudden change caught Charlotte off guard. As the imposter's blade was about to reach Charlotte, Evan instantly appeared in front of her. He fiercely grabbed the magic sword in his hand. The fear produced by blood lineage suppression made him retreat abruptly. Evan then turned to check on his master's condition. He also saw the scar on Charlotte's face. The next second, powerful energy burst from him. The mysterious power on the imposter's body was rapidly dissipating. His voice began to tremble involuntarily. I'm sorry I shouldn't have attacked. Please spare me." However, what greeted him was Evan's fierce kick. "You dare. You really don't know your place." The mysterious aura on the imposter's body directly dissipated into the world. The imposter's consciousness also returned to normal. Charlotte watched all this, not understanding what was happening. Before she could go and ask, Jeffrey quickly caught up. "Sorry, he went crazy for a moment. I couldn't keep an eye on him." And that malicious power, under Belmont's operation, was gradually being wrapped up. Finally, it was successfully sealed in the sealing room. After this incident, Belmont gained even more respect for Charlotte. A powerful advanced sealing technique. She was able to cast it effortlessly without any preparation. As the evil fragment was sealed, the magical beast here also instantly disappeared, and the disciples present immediately rushed back to Charlotte's side, afraid that something might happen to their master again. But when these troublesome disciples gathered, they couldn't stand others vying for their master's attention. Julian and Don Monte's verbal battle immediately began. Dan Monte wanted to find who hurt Charlotte's face, but couldn't find anyone, while Julian, seeing his real master again, was overwhelmed with emotion. The poor imposter witnessed their reunion and was so angry he lost his breath. Finally, the trouble that needed to be resolved was naturally Evan. Looking closely, Evan's eyes had turned red again. Remembering what Evan said when his eyes were red, Charlotte was furious. She said she needed to confirm Evan's current identity. Evan turned around, his cold demeanor looking incredibly cool. But the next second, his eyes widened involuntarily. Charlotte directly flew a kick at him without a word. Evan, who was just imposing and powerful, now looked like an obedient youngster accepting punishment. Everyone was stunned by Charlotte's unexpected move. Charlotte grabbed Evan, who had been kicked down. "If you really are Evan, why did you protect me before? Why aren't you dodging when I hit you now? Evan, I must figure out what exactly happened to you. Now I'm giving you one last chance. I'm asking you, will you obediently hold my hand and come back? Or do you want everyone here to beat you back?" The corners of Evan's mouth involuntarily lifted. "I want to go back with you. If one day Master says she wants to destroy the world and harm innocent people, what would you do? If that day really comes, it must be because the world did something that deserves to be destroyed." After returning to the Mabel country, Evan was put under control, and after leaving his master, he became silent. Dan Monte and Julian, as always, argued over their jealousy for their master. Only Jeffrey remembered that their master came back to fall in love. Now she had to worry about these disciples again, and didn't even have time to pursue love. After Charlotte woke up from a nap, the first thing she did was call for Jeffrey. This infuriated the jealous disciples. Although full of jealousy, Julian was still in denial. Based on his experience, Master usually deals with the person who made the most serious mistake first. But that wasn't the case. Jeffrey got closer and closer. Charlotte pushed him to the side. Slowly, Jeffrey was pushed onto the bed. Charlotte stared at Jeffrey's chest, actually asking him to take off his clothes. Hearing Charlotte's order to undress, Jeffrey was completely confused. Even though he guessed Charlotte's intention, he still started to act, slowly removing his tie, coat, and shirt. Jeffrey revealed his sexy muscles, but Charlotte was already impatient. She snapped her fingers. Jeffrey's clothes instantly exploded. He hurriedly covered his grape seeds, showing Charlotte the golden light, until Charlotte drank the righteous potion he gave her. Jeffrey immediately revealed his true form. Charlotte hurriedly walked forward, carefully examining the formation on Jeffrey's body. As a great magician, Charlotte knew better than anyone what this was. It was a contract formation that had been banned for over 100 years. In the past, nobles created this formation to control slaves. If the noble died, the slaves would also die. If the slaves died, the noble wouldn't be harmed at all. But now, Jeffrey had used it on himself and Charlotte. If Charlotte died, he would die too. If Charlotte was injured, he would be injured as well. Charlotte didn't understand why a Grand Duke of the Empire would do such a thing. Jeffrey had no choice. He looked at Charlotte lovingly, placing her hand on his chest. He knew he had almost lost her. If Charlotte hadn't come to find him, he might not have known that Charlotte had left this world. Jeffrey would have continued as usual, eating, sleeping, and passing time boringly. Although Charlotte had left a will for her disciples to inform Jeffrey after her death, Jeffrey knew that if Charlotte really left this world, his life would have no meaning. So he made this contract with Charlotte just to let her know that she was his entire world. Jeffrey was about to confess his love to Charlotte when suddenly, with a loud bang, the door was smashed open. Charlotte's two disciples walked in and saw the scene before them. They were stunned. A man and a woman alone in a room, naked, was too unbearable to look at. Afraid of angering his master, Damani quickly distanced himself, saying, "I only came to stop Julian." But Charlotte was more concerned about Jeffrey. Looking at the ring Jeffrey had given her before, she couldn't help but wonder. This ring could not only transmit sound from afar, but also replenish magic power. In the entire continent, those who could make such a thing were few. Moreover, this person could also help Jeffrey perform the contract formation that had been banned for over 100 years. Someone this powerful, Charlotte must know, but she couldn't remember who it was at the moment. As the most outstanding young magician in Mabel, Belmont had fully confirmed Charlotte's identity in Caecilian. Afterwards, he constantly appeared by Charlotte's side. His purpose was to make Charlotte forget that he had first questioned her identity. And another purpose was to be Caecilian's walking monitor, responsible for supervising Charlotte's whereabouts. But just then, a sunflower-like fairy appeared before Charlotte. At the same time, he was also turned into a cute cat. Although Charlotte was fierce, she quickly calmed down. She immediately chased after the sunflower. The sunflower trembled as it looked at Charlotte. Suddenly, it transformed into human form. It turned out to be the Fairy King and his only heir, who was also Charlotte's fourth disciple, Eldo. Charlotte had not yet received any news or whereabouts of this last disciple, but she knew the Fairy King must know. He just wouldn't tell Charlotte. Now that he appeared before Charlotte, there must be something important that he had to pay attention to. He reminded Charlotte again, "I told you that taking him as your disciple would make you regret it." The Fairy King was referring to Evan. Now he also sensed Charlotte's change. Before, Charlotte neglected her health for work. Now that her life was tied to Jeffrey's, Charlotte would certainly take care of herself from now on. He gave Charlotte a blessing, allowing her to use it once and only once, to regain her former powerful strength. Then he disappeared. Charlotte, worried about Evan's situation, decided to sneak in using her cat form. After all, Caecilian wasn't allowing her to see Evan now. Learning from Jeffrey about the reason for the master's disappearance, the disciples held a big meeting and reached a consensus. They were all now important figures in their own right. They should let their master live a comfortable life, and they would just be the master's silent support, not letting her worry anymore. Julian remembered what the master had told him. When he was criticized for following the wrong master to do bad things, Charlotte had told him, if in the future he really became someone like an imposter, he should step up to stop him in time, rather than joining in doing bad things. Julian shared this teaching with Damani. If one day the master says she wants to destroy the world and harm innocent people, what would you do? Damani's answer was very simple. If that day really comes, it must be that the world has done something that deserves to be destroyed. The first step of the plan to save Evan was to turn into a little cat, to let the master enjoy life worry-free. The eldest disciple decided not to let her see the fifth disciple, Evan. It turned out everyone knew that the evil Charlotte once sacrificed herself to defeat was now Evan, to prevent evil from resurging. Caecilian, as the king, had to strictly control the now unstable Evan. When evil was reborn, Charlotte already knew everything, but she didn't choose to destroy it. She chose to redeem it. And Evan, who became Charlotte's fifth disciple, now seemed to have been successfully transformed. But now he was locked up alone, and Charlotte was very worried about Evan's state. The memory erasing potion used on Evan had obviously lost its effect. Evan gradually recalled memories of his past life. It turned out he was the evil that people feared. Learning that Charlotte wanted to secretly meet Evan, Jeffrey didn't stop her. He always stood by Charlotte's side regarding her thoughts. He even decided to buy Charlotte more time. With the harmless appearance of a little cat, Charlotte successfully snuck into the prison holding Evan. The multiple layers of magic formations here clearly showed how much Caecilian valued this. But Charlotte quickly found him. Evan, alone here, was very lonely. Only when Charlotte's voice appeared did he perk up again. "You're so willful. Why is your reaction different every time you see me? Why do your pupils change color from time to time? I can't figure you out at all." Evan, originally lifeless, frantically responded the moment he heard his master's voice. "I thought you wouldn't come. I've been waiting for you. You said we'd come back together, but you left me alone in a place like this." Charlotte didn't answer, just continued to gently ask him to confess everything he had done over these years. Evan didn't argue, and calmly spoke about the dreams he'd been having these days. He would recall past events. He already knew his identity. Because Charlotte hadn't appeared for so long, he began to blame himself. "You knew from the beginning, didn't you? That's why you didn't take me seriously. You must have hated me for a very long time. After all, keeping someone like me around must be terrifying." But in reality, Charlotte cherished all her disciples dearly. No matter what their past lives were like, they were now all her beloved disciples. And now, Charlotte, unwilling to come out, simply didn't want her disciple to see her in this state. Seeing that Charlotte still hadn't come out, Evan began to release his powerful force, trying to break out to find his master. "Charlotte, are you going to abandon me and leave again this time?" Seeing that verbal persuasion was ineffective, Charlotte had no choice but to flash out. "I call you assistant. Can you hear me?" The moment he saw his master, even Evan, who was just sulking, couldn't help but be stunned. The two just silently looked at each other. Charlotte hurriedly broke this damn awkwardness. "Quickly answer my previous question. What exactly were you trying to do with all these things you've done over the years?" Hearing this, Evan immediately obediently squatted down and casually responded, "Okay." Seeing the injuries caused by Evan's recklessness, Charlotte softened and scolded the boy. "You fool. Let me see your hand quickly." The stubborn Evan immediately said it was nothing, but Charlotte knew these were injuries caused by magic backflow. If not treated promptly, the wounds would only get worse. Evan continued to sulk. "Anyway, you don't like me. You don't need to care about me." At a loss, Charlotte had to move closer to look at Evan. She hurriedly reached out her hand. The little cat appearance given by the Spirit King would return to human form under powerful magic. Evan just wanted to have his master all to himself. He understood that there were so many people around his master. Now, knowing his identity was once the evil, he was more worried that Charlotte would dislike him because of this. He was afraid of losing his master because he knew that in this world, only his master was so kind to him. But when it came to stealing Thorgan's heart, Evan started to be cheeky. He told Charlotte that he had already died once in the Kabilon Mountains. While catching Charlotte's attention, he didn't explain the matter completely. Charlotte hurriedly grabbed his clothes and headbutted him hard to teach him a lesson. Unexpectedly, Jeffrey, who was stalling for time on the other side, quickly covered his forehead and cried out in pain. When he looked up, his forehead was also swollen and red. Caecilian, not knowing what was going on, also guessed Jeffrey's intention. Jeffrey immediately relayed Charlotte's original words. It seemed that only her words could be heard by her disciples. That was to let Evan go to the Klaus Empire, which was also Charlotte's intention. At this time, Evan, who was hit by Charlotte, pretended to be dead lying on the ground, wanting his master to pat him. "Stop pretending. I'm in pain too." For this troublesome fifth disciple, Charlotte also expressed that she couldn't be bothered to ask anymore. She would investigate all of this herself. Unexpectedly, Evan started to play tricks. He continued to pretend to be unwell. Charlotte, worried about him, wanted to check his condition, but she was pulled forward by Evan. Then she was pressed down on the ground. Their fingers intertwined tightly. "Charlotte, I missed you. I've missed you for a very long time, Master." Without necessary harm, this was the first time he stood up to refuse the request his master conveyed to him. The fifth disciple pressed Charlotte down on the ground. "Charlotte, I missed you." After softly venting all his emotions, he tiredly lay on top of Charlotte, only because he missed his master so much. During the time waiting for his master to come, he hadn't slept at all. While he was asleep, Charlotte quickly bandaged the wound on his hand. Belmont, who sensed the commotion in the prison, rushed over. The moment he saw Lady Charlotte, he couldn't help but widen his small eyes. "When on earth did this lady arrive here?" Charlotte also told Belmont without hesitation that she was going to break Evan out of jail, and Belmont had one and only one choice. That was to help them break out of jail. Meanwhile, on the other side, Caecilian also refused Jeffrey's request. "Even if it's Master's intention, I can't possibly transfer Evan to another place." But Jeffrey wasn't worried at all, because he understood that Charlotte would have her own way. Caecilian, however, was very confident about this. He was the current emperor of Mabel. Even though it was a country created by the Master, he believed that the current magicians were certainly loyal to him. Therefore, without Caecilian's consent, Mabel's magicians would definitely not hand over Evan. But he could never have imagined that his most capable assistant was now acting as Charlotte's lackey. Although he was coerced, at first he firmly refused, but under Charlotte's blatant threats, after taking several slaps without fainting, he didn't dare to offend Charlotte. He had no choice but to reluctantly follow Charlotte's arrangements. Meanwhile, a sudden outbreak occurred in the Mabel Nation. A massive magical beast suddenly appeared in the imperial city of Mabel. Magicians in the city rushed to support and assess the situation. This magical beast was no ordinary one. It was an ancient high-level beast from hundreds of years ago. At this moment, it suddenly rose into the air, gathering powerful fire energy in its mouth. Just as it was about to spit it out, a huge rock flew over and smashed into its mouth. "Don't you know your own strength? How dare you cause trouble in the imperial city?" Belmont made a domineering entrance. The Mabel Nation of today is no longer what it used to be. It's worth noting that the disciple's strength has now reached Charlotte's level from back then. The mysterious person on the magical beast started to play dumb. So the world has changed. You must all be disciples of the great magician. It seems I've been asleep for a long time. Before he could finish, an arrow shot towards him. The mysterious person caught it. I didn't expect there to be so many powerful people after 100 years. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. More swords came flying. It was Julian continuously attacking him. "You vicious elf, stop shooting arrows. Let me finish speaking first. Who wants to hear your nonsense?" Belmont also started attacking. It wasn't until Caecilian arrived that everyone stopped their actions. Finally, someone who can talk properly. It turned out that the mysterious person's purpose for coming was to welcome Evan. He threatened Caecilian. "If you don't hand over that person, the magical beasts in the city will slaughter everyone." The commotion in the city also caught someone's attention. That was Charlotte's last disciple, Eldo. He, who had always hidden his identity, also chose to join this chaotic battle. The world-destroying magical beasts descended again. Everyone was caught in the crisis of the magical beasts attack. And every time magical beasts appeared, the girl would, with her small frame, bear the burden of the world to successfully repel these magical beasts. Charlotte's fourth disciple, Eldo, who had always hidden his identity, also joined the battle during this magical beast outbreak. However, the reappearance of the magical beast was all for Charlotte's fifth disciple, Evan, because he was once the evil leader of the magical beasts. And while he was detained by Caecilian, Charlotte took advantage of everyone's distraction to take him away. Jeffrey also came to assist, drawn by love. Only poor Belmont was tied up on the side, forced to cooperate with the escape. Jeffrey immediately transformed into Charlotte's little confidant. He asked Belmont, "When Lady Charlotte and the Great King have a disagreement, whose side will you take?" Just because of a moment's hesitation in his eyes, Jeffrey gently smashed the clothes into his face. Just then, a pink butterfly fluttered past Charlotte's carriage window. She seemed to understand something. That's right, it was her fourth disciple Eldo who appeared. Charlotte instructed Jeffrey to help her safely take Evan to the Klaus Empire. Jeffrey's lips curled up slightly, happily agreeing. In the next second, Charlotte disappeared from the carriage. Looking at the still sleeping Evan behind him, Jeffrey could only pray that nothing else would happen. Meanwhile, in the city, magical beasts were running amok. Fortunately, under Cassilian's leadership over the years, the civilians had mastered the ability to protect themselves. They all used their own strength to fight against the magical beasts. Judith and her companion who followed also used their learned swordsmanship to join the battle. Charlotte followed the aura of the butterfly spirit beast. She finally saw Eldo again. Since her rebirth, news of the fourth disciple had disappeared from her ears. However, for all these years, Eldo had actually been quietly guarding by her side. Since Eldo became Charlotte's disciple, he liked to disguise his identity to secretly follow his master, sticking close to her even now. In fact, from the day Charlotte was reborn, Eldo already knew about this. He would transform into Judith's appearance, always secretly playing her role to accompany his master. For the fairy tribe skilled in shape-shifting, unless faced with a powerful magician, ordinary people wouldn't detect their disguise. As the next fairy king heir and a great magician, it was even easier for Eldo to hide from his master, who had lost her magic after rebirth. At this moment, Eldo was slaughtering enemies on a large scale. All magical beasts before him were dispersing. The spectacular scene directly intimidated the protected civilians. Did he alone defeat so many magical beasts? Eldo turned around, telling other magicians who came to protect to leave, because here, he alone was enough. On the other side, Belmont and others had also finished their battle with the mysterious person. After all, in the face of powerful strength, any more words would be in vain. However, Cassilian also saw through the man's identity at a glance. The man before them was not his true form. As Cassilian wanted to question further, the next second, the mysterious person was forcefully stomped by a big foot. Julian directly destroyed this avatar, only because the mysterious person was speaking ill of the master. How could he tolerate that? Is it necessary to hear him finish his nonsense? Cassilian spoke again. Just now, I saw a very bad-tempered butterfly nearby. Julian and Belmont understood after hearing this. You mean he's here too? The scene shifts back to Eldo's side. At this moment, he was killing enemies with great pleasure, but he kept releasing butterfly spirit beasts, paying attention to his master's movements. At this time, Charlotte had successfully rescued people on the road. Coincidentally, among those rescued was the crown prince who had bullied Cassilian when they were young. But with Charlotte's current appearance, he didn't recognize her. Just as he was about to ask for Charlotte's name, Charlotte directly turned and left. Eldo stood on a high point in the city, scenes flashing through his mind. It was the day of his last meeting with his master. Charlotte asked him, "Do you still hate humans?" Eldo answered without hesitation that he only liked his master. What about others? Eldo hesitated, but he still firmly told his master that he didn't hate them anymore. Recalling those beautiful times of the past, that was also the last thing his master said to him. It seems I won't have to worry about you anymore. But this scene remained frozen in his memories. If he had known that would be the last thing his master said to him, he definitely wouldn't have answered so affirmatively. And now, any humans who dared to obstruct his plans, or Master Ash's disciples, he wouldn't spare any of them. Charlotte approached his position step by step. Here, the rampaging of magical beasts was even more outrageous, only because there was a summoning array from the evil era here. The array could, according to the caster's imagination, let magic power take any form they imagined. Charlotte stood in front of the formed magic power. Eldo, I know you must have found me early on, but you didn't come to visit me. It must be because you're disappointed in your master, right? Charlotte allowed the evil magic power to attack her. Charlotte understood that this way, Eldo should appear, only to see Eldo transform into a giant fairy. He fiercely grabbed the magical hand in front of Charlotte. With just a casual tear, the magic power directly vanished before him. He immediately turned around, gently facing her. How could I ever be disappointed in you, master? The next second, Eldo slowly lifted Charlotte up, placing her on his heart position, expressing his longing for his master. But before they could properly catch up, the mysterious person controlling the magic array appeared. So, you're the fourth disciple of the great magician Charlotte. I never dreamed a fairy would save people. Eldo responded to his nonsense with dominance. Someone who doesn't dare show their true form has no right to speak before me. The mysterious person put on another act. If it weren't for that person's orders, I would have devastated this land long ago. The next second, Belmont suddenly appeared. He launched an attack towards him. Why listen to this thing's nonsense? However, before he could react, Eldo had already placed Charlotte in his mouth, gulping her down with a glug-glug sound. Belmont stomped his foot anxiously. Hey, what did you swallow? Spit it out right now. Eldo grinned mischievously at him. Master belongs to me alone. Then with a poof, he disappeared from the spot with Charlotte. Julian, who arrived a step later, also guessed what happened. Master, we're finally all together again. At this moment, Charlotte understood that she had been taken into the subspace created by Eldo. It seems this guy Eldo was sulking a bit. The exhausted Charlotte simply closed her eyes, and the next second she fell asleep. When she opened her eyes again, she had arrived in an illusion. The Tao woman had 5 genius disciples. Each became the most powerful existence in the world. The first and second disciples together eradicated the remaining magical beasts in the world. The third disciple was responsible for maintaining a pure land, silently helping the weak in hardship. The fourth disciple became a bridge between his race and humans, resolving long-standing conflicts between groups. And the fifth disciple established an academy to cultivate magicians. But this ideal utopia existed only in the illusion Charlotte had entered. The moment she opened her eyes, she became Sylvan's wedding officiant. In this world, Jeffrey had left the mortal world early, just days after the news of Charlotte's death spread. But his cause of death was too ridiculous. He died from slipping on banana peels 3 times in the same place. It seems this was an illusion created by Eldo. How much did he hate Jeffrey? Here, Charlotte experienced the life of an ordinary person, but she understood that this wasn't the real world. Eldo transformed into Judith's appearance again, staying by Charlotte's side. Is this the life of ordinary people? Falling in love, building a new family, living together. This is the life you want, right? So I'll help you. Charlotte also guessed the Judith before her was Eldo. It seems he wanted to convey some message to her, but was unwilling to release her from the illusion. Charlotte had to rely on her own will to try to leave. In the past, this place certainly couldn't have trapped her. At this time, the illusion began to change. The former evil appeared, grabbing Charlotte's neck and raving, I understand you. You miss it, don't you? That once powerful strength. Everyone submitting at your feet, fearing and praising you. Charlotte hurriedly broke free from Earl. The next second, he tied her up again. You must be thinking of getting all that back, right? Of course, this includes me. Charlotte's strong will erupted. Stop talking nonsense. The illusion was instantly shattered. He suddenly opened his eyes. At this moment, a group of people were surrounding him. Miss, are you all right? Judith and her brother appeared before her, followed closely by Belmont. The next second, Julian also appeared. Behind him was the captured Eldo. He smiled slightly at his master. Master, I've brought the person to you. Charlotte looked over. Eldo was sniffling pitifully. At this time, Mabel had also temporarily calmed down. Alan, who had woken up, wanted to escape, but after hearing Jeffrey's persuasion, he quietly sat down nearby, only because he didn't want Charlotte to feel disappointed if she found out he had run away. As for Caecilian, he discovered that Belmont had also been taken away. The one who escaped was also the great magical beast that had been brought back with Evan. Regarding the mysterious person's appearance this time, Caecilian also had a preliminary judgment. It seems the magical beast came more to test their current strength. The scene changes. They had already returned to their residence. Charlotte took Eldo aside and questioned him. Eldo, since when have you been watching me? The deceased master would never know. The 5 powerful disciples he had taken in during his lifetime all changed their personalities after he left. All of this was just to find him, because only the master was their way home. However, at that time, no one knew that the master had already been reborn and returned. Only the 4th disciple, Eldo, received this news. But he didn't go to reunite with him. He just silently protected his master. Until now, when the other disciples learned of the master's return, he was willing to appear before everyone again. This is the story of Eldo's encounter with his master. Before before Eldo became Charlotte's disciple, he once had a very good friend to confide in. This was also Eldo's only close friend. They would always share their stories with each other. Agil told him about the good things about humans, but Eldo didn't think so. Humans were always so treacherous and cunning. However, the moment he saw his master, he instantly became his master's loyal fan. He hid behind a pillar, coming to see his master's true face. But he mistook the person. He mistakenly thought Jeffrey was the master the king had found for him. Seeing Jeffrey's aloof appearance, Eldo was very displeased. Such an arrogant look was just annoying to see. So he began to play pranks on Jeffrey. At first, he just manipulated the water in the pool to splash on the crowd. Unexpectedly, Jeffrey blocked it and didn't care. Feeling ignored, Eldo became angrier. He directly used harmful attack magic to attack Jeffrey. Unfortunately, Jeffrey already knew of his existence. He slightly tilted his head and dodged most of the attacks. But this also successfully angered Jeffrey. This joke was too much. He instantly arrived at Eldo's hiding spot and swung his sword at him. Fortunately, he didn't intend to kill. He just sent the sword energy to his side. However, this successfully scared Eldo, who came to observe. This person just now really wanted to kill me. Fairy power erupted from him. Eldo was very angry. He would absolutely not allow such a person to be his master. Then he began to counterattack with all his might. But he was easily dealt with by Jeffrey. Jeffrey immediately counterattacked. At this moment, Charlotte appeared before them, successfully blocking the raging Jeffrey. "What are you doing?" Jeffrey didn't expect that Charlotte, who was supposed to return the next day, would appear before his eyes at this moment. He immediately put away his sword obediently. It was only then that he realized the fairy before him was actually the disciple Charlotte was about to take in. Jeffrey immediately changed his demeanor. With endless smiles on his face, he apologized. I'm sorry. If I had known you were Charlotte's disciple, I wouldn't have been so rude." But because of this incident, Eldo also made a mental note of Jeffrey's bad impression. The embarrassed Jeffrey hurriedly turned and left, leaving the space for the newly met master and disciple. That arrogant guy. Next time I see him, I'll definitely beat him. Now that he truly knew Charlotte was his master, Eldo both liked and stubbornly hated her. He openly said he didn't like Charlotte and didn't want Charlotte to be his master at all. But in the following days, he always secretly came to see Charlotte, only because Charlotte respected his choice and didn't forcefully take him in as a disciple. Eldo could only keep making his presence known in this way. "I'm such a perfect fairy. Why doesn't he take me as his disciple?" His good friend Tagil teased him. "But didn't you refuse to be his disciple yourself?" Eldo remained stubborn, but his actions were the best proof. "Why don't you like me?" "I didn't say I don't like you. You said you didn't want to be my disciple." However, when Eldo learned that Charlotte had already taken 3 disciples before, he became even more depressed. "I'm such an excellent fairy, yet I'm only the 4th disciple he wants to take." But even so, Eldo still didn't give up on this beloved potential master. He kept spending money to buy paparazzi information about Charlotte's outings. Until this day, he learned that Charlotte would be meeting with other disciples soon. He went out for a depressed walk. Why didn't she invite him? He was very unhappy. Then he realized he wasn't her disciple yet. Just as he was feeling troubled and confused, a strange man appeared. He introduced himself as Pell. Eldo knew this person. He was the human lover Tagil often mentioned. But Eldo wasn't friendly to him. He knew this person had bad character. But Tagil was still in love and wouldn't listen to advice at all. At this moment, Pell was holding a weapon in his hand. Thinking Eldo didn't know, he started to pretend to approach. And when he got close, Eldo directly used magic to pin him to the ground. Approaching with a weapon, "What exactly is your purpose?" Unexpectedly, Tagil was also hiding behind a nearby pillar. Seeing this, he immediately ran out. "Stop, let me explain." And in Tagil's explanation, Eldo learned that they were passing by and discovered this. Pell was seeking help, but the naive Eldo still chose to believe him. However, thinking back the next day, he began to question this incident again. Just as he was worrying about investigating the truth himself, a golden light orb appeared in the air above him. Eldo opened the scroll and saw it was an invitation to Charlotte's gathering with her disciples. The girl met the powerful magician for the first time and directly chose him as her master. However, she didn't know that this seemingly kind master was actually the great magician revered by everyone on the continent. After receiving Charlotte's invitation, Eldo arrived at the meeting place. This was his first time meeting Charlotte's other disciples. The elderly appearance of the first disciple Caecilian, or the third disciple Belmont, fighting daily with the second disciple Julian. All of these were taken in by his eyes. At this moment, he also discovered that these disciples' identities were all extraordinary. The first disciple was a king. The second disciple was the guardian of the Pandem Forest. The third disciple was the leader of a mysterious organization. He couldn't beat any of them individually. Eldo, who initially didn't want to be the fourth, now couldn't help but waver in his heart. But in his heart, he hoped that everyone would leave this master, so he could naturally become Charlotte's only disciple. Before Eldo could officially become a disciple, he heard shocking news. Caecilian reported to the master. Recently, citizens in the city had been continuously harmed, and there was a new murder case last night. It was the person Eldo had encountered at that time. As someone involved, he wanted to investigate the matter thoroughly. Now Caecilian had already completed the investigation. All the evidence pointed to Pell. But when Caecilian mentioned his good friend Tagil, Eldo couldn't sit still, because from the information received, Pell might be Tagil, and he was the murderer. Eldo denied everyone's judgment because he knew that Pell and Tagil were two different identities. For Caecilian, their guess was obviously wrong. Charlotte, noticing Eldo's unhappiness, also wanted to stop this topic. Eldo was no longer patient. After a simple goodbye, he turned and left directly. He believed that Pell had threatened Tagil. In his memory, Tagil was a very kind person. He absolutely couldn't have done such a thing. Therefore, Eldo decided to investigate the matter himself. But when he arrived at Tagil's residence, he found the house in a mess. Sensing something was wrong, Eldo hurriedly followed the blood trail. Until he came to the room, he discovered there was a magic circle here. And when he stood on the magic circle, a dazzling light shot out from the formation. Following that, Eldo was teleported to a tunnel. He moved forward inside and finally found Tagil's location. He was exhausted at this time. Pell forcefully embraced him, saying he wasn't allowed to fall asleep. The strong Eldo immediately rushed out to rebuke him. Unexpectedly, he saw something even more terrifying. To prove his good friend's innocence, Eldo personally came to his residence. The house was in a mess. He found Tagil's hiding place. What he saw was a horrifying sight. Pell, as a human, had chosen to collude with monster spiders. Eldo hurriedly drove him away and supported Tagil. However, when he thought all this was done by Pell told him the master controlling the monster spiders wasn't him. It was Eldo's good friend Tagil beside him. Eldo, of course, didn't believe this was done by his good friend and hurriedly denied his words. The kind and gentle Tagil would not collude with monster beasts. However, the next second, Tagil reached out his right hand towards him. "I'm sorry, Eldo." He seemed to have merged with the monster. Under the urging of the monster claw, Eldo fainted the next second. As Eldo fell unconscious, images of Tagil flashed in his mind. As a powerful fairy, Eldo had been ostracized by other clan members since his birth. Only Tagil, fearless of everyone's criticism, chose to become his only friend. His gentle and sweet smile was engraved in Eldo's heart. But that cold expression made Eldo no longer recognize him. He couldn't possibly become someone who would harm others. Moreover, Tagil was a fairy who loved humans so much. At this moment, Damont's words came to his ears. "What are you saying?" Eldo struggled to wake up from his painful memories. When did this guy come over? And it wasn't just Danmont. Even Charlotte had come in person. Eldo, who had fainted, had no idea what was happening now. Charlotte briefly explained the situation to him. They had tracked and followed him using the bag Eldo carried with him. When they arrived here, Eldo was found unconscious, tied up with spider silk. Charlotte hoped to understand what had happened from Eldo's account. But Eldo had one request. He hoped that his future human master could help his good friend and not harm him. Eldo believed there must be a reason behind all of this. After learning the whole story, Charlotte immediately used a slight technique. A hidden passage was instantly revealed. Just as they were about to set off, the teleportation circle nearby suddenly lit up. Unexpectedly, Jeffrey and others had also arrived. His appearance immediately increased the hostility among the disciples. After all, this guy was famously disdainful in front of Charlotte's disciples. Jeffrey didn't act like an outsider. He just handed the scroll to Charlotte and stated that he was also here to capture the wanted criminal Pell. After a brief handover, the group entered the hidden cave that Charlotte had just opened. However, as they went deeper, rustling noises began to echo in the cave. Everyone looked closely. There were a large number of monster beasts hiding here. Danmont immediately stepped forward to cast magic. Under the powerful force, the small monster beasts were all eliminated. At this moment, Pell appeared before them. He smugly said to Eldo, "I knew you wouldn't leave so easily. I didn't expect you to bring so many people." Eldo only wanted to know Tadgel's whereabouts and didn't want to hear this person's nonsense again. But Pell calmly clapped his hands. An evil smile appeared on his face. He wanted to eliminate Eldo again. Little did he know that the attack magic circle he had prepared in advance had been altered the moment Charlotte arrived here. Why is it the magic circle responding? Charlotte imitated him by clapping her hands. The formations in the cave lit up one by one. Pell began to panic. The situation before him seemed to be beyond his control. And this foolish fellow still didn't know that standing before him was the revered great magician Charlotte. Charlotte had simply manipulated it a bit. The control of this formation had long been transferred to her. Pell, realizing belatedly, reacted. The woman before him, wasn't she the great magician by her appearance? At this point, he began to tremble in fear. How could you bring these people here? Are you trying to get Tadgel killed? These words hit Eldo's weak spot again. He didn't understand what Pell meant. But when Pell told him Tadgel was the murderer, Eldo became flustered, because he understood that everyone must face the consequences of their mistakes. If Tadgel really had killed someone, then Charlotte and the others would surely take appropriate measures against him. Eldo hesitated. He turned to face Charlotte and the others. Charlotte saw his concern. She tried to calm his emotions, but Eldo didn't give her the chance. He suddenly disappeared from the spot. He transformed into a butterfly spirit beast and continued flying deeper into the cave. He wanted to find the truth from Tadgel himself. However, a blinding light flashed before him. When Eldo woke up again, he was tied up with spider silk again. This time, Tadgel appeared before him. Rather die restlessly himself than let his best friend suffer even the slightest harm. However, such sincere friendship could only be separated by life and death. Eldo transformed into a pink butterfly spirit beast and flew towards the depths of the cave. A blinding light flashed. He fainted again. When he woke up once more, the friend he was looking for appeared before him. Faced with Eldo's questioning, Tadgel smiled slightly, calmly telling Eldo everything. The recent murders in the Mabel Empire, as well as the spider monster beasts before them, were all his handiwork. What Eldo couldn't understand was how Tadgel, who once loved humans so much, had now become so cold. However, Tadgel's answer was that he wanted to eliminate the evil in the world and be reborn. Eldo was even more confused. It was said that evil had once devastated the world beyond recognition, yet the kind Tadgel in his heart wanted to revive it. Tadgel placed the cocoon wrapped in spider silk on the magic circle at his feet. Then he dripped his fairy blood onto it. Humans are inherently greedy and cunning. They took everything from me. Humans should be purified, and evil is the existence that purifies all things. If the great magician hadn't won back then, the world might have become more beautiful. Eldo couldn't understand. At this moment, Tadgel seemed to have joined a cult, but his broken ideals had completely deviated from everyone else's. Eldo could only desperately shout at Tadgel to stop his current behavior. He shouted hysterically. However, Tadgel had already gone too far. Refusing to listen, he insisted on summoning the power of evil. Suddenly, a flying sword swiftly flew towards the cocoon. The cocoon in Tadgel's hand was immediately pierced. It was Julian who did it. At this moment, he was holding a bow, an arrow to uphold justice. Tadgel turned around fiercely. "How dare you ruin my plan?" The strong Eldo also hurriedly asked Julian to untie the restraints on his body. Julian immediately shot an arrow in his direction. The spider silk on his body was also dissolved. The rescued Eldo immediately wanted to approach his good friend to understand the situation. However, what greeted him was endless blocking. "I don't want to hurt you. Eldo, please don't move." Then, ignoring the advice, he tried to release the power of evil again. Julian had no choice but to use a bit of magic. He directly threw vines onto his body, then tied him up in one go. Subdued by the power, this bad boy was tied up again. Then there was a loud boom. The nearby cave entrance was blasted open. Charlotte and her group also arrived at the scene. But Eldo was very afraid. He feared that his human master would enforce the law on Tadjil. In a moment of rashness, he had to use his power to break Julian's vines. He didn't want anyone to harm Tadjil. This was his only good friend. Seeing Eldo's desperate protection of himself, Tadjil seized the moment to continue with his plan. He had already merged with the monster beast. If the monster beast was harmed, he would suffer the same damage. Using the power of the fused monster beast, he created an illusory space. Charlotte didn't take action. She understood this was Eldo's friend, so she couldn't harm him so easily. She hoped to have a talk with Tadjil. Under the urging of the monster beast's power, the illusion created by Tadjil was completed. Charlotte and the others were also sucked into different illusions. In Jeffrey's illusion, he got what he wanted. That was successfully marrying Charlotte. And in Damont's illusion, he also saw his master. But when he reached out to grab his master angrily shook him off. "Don't touch me, you filthy demon. You dirty demon race." It turned out that Tadjil was using illusions to create their inner greed and fears. Unsurprisingly, the person Jeffrey loved most was Charlotte. He dreamed of being with Charlotte, and in his illusion, Charlotte was marrying him. Damont feared being ostracized because he was of mixed demon blood. What he feared most was being abandoned by his master. After all, his master was his safe harbor. Charlotte wanted to negotiate with Tadjil properly, to free him from evil's control. But this stubborn child, after bringing her into the illusion, still insisted on taking things to the extreme. He lived for evil. "You've been through all that. Why do you still give your heart to humans?" Charlotte didn't understand what he was saying. All she knew was that when evil descended, it was to destroy everything. However, Tadjil kept saying that he had read its mind in the traces of evil. Only he understood evil's thoughts. Then, he summoned evil into Charlotte's illusion. The two immediately began a new battle. "I just wanted to see this world through your eyes, and you brought it down directly. What a pity." Jeffrey and Damont, trapped in the illusion, also began to break the formation. They all understood that none of this was real, but they longed for it to be real, yet also feared it being real. Damont's painful scream broke the silence. Charlotte, having dealt with evil, turned around and quickly urged Damont, who had just awakened, to pull himself together. Hearing his master's gentle voice again, Damont realized he had escaped the illusion. Seeing Damont crying, Charlotte immediately came to his side. "What did you see? Why are you crying?" Jeffrey also returned from the illusion. Just in time to see Damont in tears, he also joined in. However, at this moment, Tadjil became even more frantic. He told Charlotte, "The illusions created by evil are actually memories left in evil's traces." Obviously, his fate of defeat hasn't changed. But Tadjil, he wanted to absorb these fragments with evil's power into his body. Unexpectedly, his shoulder was suddenly slashed. It turned out that Julian was outside the illusion, fiercely attacking the monster beast that had merged with him. As the guardian of the Pandem Forest, he had the forest protection, so he wasn't drawn into the space. Eldo hurriedly stopped Julian. He knew that this way, Tadjil would suffer equal damage. He hoped that Julian could resolve this in a better way. This is why Julian didn't attack further. But the current Tadjil was already beyond salvation. Even the omnipotent Charlotte had no solution at this moment, because he had completely absorbed the fragments of evil. Now the only way was to send the corrupted Tadjil to the afterlife. But considering Eldo's situation, Charlotte had to find another way. At this moment, Tadjil's thought was to perish together with everyone in the illusion. He would destroy this illusion, letting the space devour everyone. But Charlotte certainly wouldn't let this happen. She would summon the Fairy King in this illusion. Only by dying under the Fairy King's protection could a fairy's soul be preserved in this world. Because fairies don't belong to this world, sending Tadjil off normally under the Fairy King's protection would also be an explanation for Eldo. Once, Charlotte had to assimilate with this space. Only after assimilating to a certain degree could Charlotte read Tadjil's thoughts from it. She must understand all of this. Seeing Charlotte not resisting Tadjil's attack, Jeffrey's eyes widened immediately. Just as he was about to attack Charlotte, Jeffrey fiercely slashed his sword at Tadjil. The spider monster beast outside also suffered equal damage. Seeing this, Eldo became even more worried about Tadjil. He quickly flew towards the monster beast. As the heir to the Fairy King, Eldo had the ability to open other fairies' illusory spaces. However, the moment he entered the space, he saw Jeffrey standing in front of Charlotte. Tadgel, who had transformed into his evil fairy form, already had a sword wound on his body. Jeffrey blamed Charlotte for not valuing her own life. He had guessed Charlotte's intentions. This was an extremely dangerous decision. He absolutely wouldn't allow Charlotte to continue communicating with this fairy. The struck Tadgel also began to collapse. The evil power in his body slowly dissipated. Charlotte, whose plan in her mind was disrupted by her big nephew, was also very displeased. She didn't want Jeffrey to interfere. She wouldn't violate the condition between her and Eldo, which was that she wouldn't harm Eldo's friends. Jeffrey was furious. Since the woman he loved deeply couldn't act, he would bear the consequences. He was about to draw his sword to chase after Damot. Suddenly, a big foot flew over. This suited Charlotte's wishes perfectly. After all, she had been wanting to give Jeffrey a good beating. She didn't know what this guy was up to. By now, Eldo had arrived at the scene. He once again faced his good friend. Tadgel's current state was already in a terrible mess. Eldo desperately squeezed out a few tears from his eyes. He asked for Charlotte's opinion. "You said you want to summon the king here, right? If the king comes, can Tadgel still be saved?" Regrettably, everything being done now was too late. Only because Tadgel had just completely absorbed the fragments of evil, and the price was his own life. Even so, Tadgel still showed no remorse. He began to release the remaining evil power in his body, attempting to send Charlotte to the afterlife with it. Seeing this, Charlotte immediately rushed forward. Now they must summon the Fairy King. The child before them was beyond saving. However, at this moment, Eldo swept past her. He leapt with all his might, directly tackling down the crazed Tadgel. Since Tadgel wouldn't listen to reason, all he could do was to accompany his good friend in death. He deeply regretted. Why couldn't he have noticed Tadgel's changes earlier? She was such a good girl. Why did she have to suffer such a fate now? He tried to read Tadgel's memories, but at this moment, the illusory space created by Tadgel began to crack. It turned out that a new guest had arrived outside the space. He placed his hand beside the monster beast. The evil power in the monster beast was continuously absorbed by him. Then he grabbed Pell nearby and infused all this evil power into his body. Even Julian could feel a tremor from this powerful, mysterious person before him. This was a warning from the Pantheon Forest. What on earth was this thing? After the mysterious man successfully controlled Pell, he carefully searched around the monster beast. Holding the pellet in his hand, he said, he indeed hid it here. At this time, the illusory space inside the monster beast was also collapsing. Painful emotions welled up. Eldo fearfully called out Tadgel's name. He wanted to take him along. He didn't want his good friend to die like this. Tadgel had long prepared himself mentally, but at this final moment, seeing his most sincere friend, he was still very reluctant in his heart. But he also didn't want Eldo to die here with him, because once the space collapsed, all creatures inside would be devoured along with it. Tadgel forcefully pushed Eldo away. He had thought he had lost everything, but it wasn't so. He still had his best friend Eldo. Watching his friend's life slip away before his eyes, the power within Eldo suddenly burst forth. He summoned his true form. This was the power inherited from the Fairy King. Then he cradled Tadgel in his hands. The space also slowly began to collapse. Everyone trapped in the illusion within the monster beast came out, and Pell, who was controlled by the evil power, turned to ashes along with the monster beast when it disappeared. After this, Eldo officially became Charlotte's fourth disciple. But at this moment, Eldo was overwhelmed with hatred. He told his master that one day he would slaughter all humans. This was because in Tadgel's final moments, through fragments of Tadgel's memories, he saw the ugliness of humans. They would stop at nothing to satisfy their desires. They used and betrayed each other. Tadgel had encountered the most evil people in this world and was repeatedly bullied and trampled upon. In the end, she was forced into a desperate situation. She used to like humans so much. She felt utterly helpless. He could only hug Charlotte and cry, expressing his grievances. Back to the present, Charlotte understood. Her fourth disciple had already experienced such painful things in the past. As the most important person to her disciple now, although she had soothed Eldo's hatred over the years, during the time she was gone, Eldo must have felt very aggrieved. The 5 genius disciples separated for many years were finally reunited with their master. But what the master didn't expect was that the 4th disciple, Eldo, didn't want the 5th disciple, Evan, to return. It turned out, when Charlotte entered Eldo's illusion and saw the final scene of evil appearing. It wasn't what Eldo wanted his master to see. All of this was due to Evan's behind-the-scenes manipulation. Knowing the reason for his master's disappearance, Eldo was even more unwilling for his master to be involved in this matter related to evil again. He just wanted his master to spend the rest of her life in peace and quiet. But how could Charlotte stand by and do nothing? Even if Eldo wanted to use space to trap her, Charlotte would still give him a good lesson. The huge commotion shook the entire building. When they reappeared in everyone's sight, Eldo had already turned into a plant-like form. The most important thing now was to reinvestigate the matter of evil. Charlotte needed to understand everything that had happened to Evan over these years, as well as the group that once appeared in the country of Mabel. The mysterious person, Danmont, was responsible for assisting Caecilian in tracking down the mysterious person. Julian was in charge of subsequent support, and Eldo would also follow them to help those in need. Understanding her disciples' concerns, Charlotte promised them this time that she would never disappear without reason again. After everything was arranged, Charlotte once again began investigating the matter of evil. Now she needed to find the locations of Jeffrey and Evan. However, when she spoke to Jeffrey through the communication ring, accompanied by a strong magical fluctuation, the ring's communication core shattered. It turned out that after Jeffrey and the others left the country of Mabel, they didn't choose to return to the Klaus Empire. They came to the Ifpadra Castle. Rumor has it that this castle has a long history. It existed in this world even before evil appeared. The surroundings of this castle were enveloped in magic. Ordinary people couldn't find it at all. But if someone discovered it, the castle's owner would either grant them a way out or cast a terrible curse upon them. However, this Ifpadra, living in legends, was known to very few people. Its identity was also one of the world's hidden secrets. After changing into neat attire, everyone appeared in front of Ifpadra Castle. As they waited for the castle gates to open, music could be heard from inside. Inside was a magnificent and luxurious palace. In the center of the castle, a group of figures appeared faintly, and this girl with a veil over her head was the rumored owner of the castle, Ifpadra, who possessed the ability to see through the essence of all things. Jeffrey and Charlotte had already been here in their early years, and Jeffrey's purpose in coming here was to seek answers from this old friend. That is, whether Evan was truly the resurrected evil. Ifpadra gracefully danced closer to Evan. From the moment Evan stepped into the castle, he felt an indescribably bad feeling. Ifpadra, attempting to further understand Evan, was quickly countered by Evan. His ethereal body had one hand directly blasted off by Evan, but in the next second, the fallen hand rose into the air, flying towards Evan's position again. The moment Evan grabbed it, Ifpadra immediately approached him again. He needed to peer into Evan's soul. Only this way could he thoroughly understand Evan's identity. Ifpadra's soul entered Evan's body. He walked towards Evan's inner heart. What appeared before him was Evan's adolescent form. However, when the young man turned around, the pressure emanating from those crimson eyes directly and severely shocked Ifpadra. Mere ghost bound to a castle. You dare to challenge me? The powerful force compelled Ifpadra to leave Evan's body. That innate fear, Ifpadra was terrified. However, he also drew a conclusion. The Evan standing before him in human form now was indeed the evil that had disappeared for 100 years. And the appearance of evil power directly affected the weather around the castle. And that small figure outside the castle was Charlotte, who had found her way here. The secret hidden in his heart for over 100 years. Today, the boy finally said those words to the girl. I love you. However, before receiving an answer from his beloved, the two were forced apart. They met and knew each other in their naive youth. Their relationship was quite good. It wouldn't be surprising to describe them as close as siblings. The girl's valiant figure knocked down one challenger after another. She would always happily turn her face to boast about her dazzling achievements to the boy. The boy, without knowing when it began, became lost in the girl's sweet smiles time and time again. But when the girl grew up, with her unrivaled record and the feat of defeating evil, she was revered as the most powerful magician and gained her own disciples. Immersed in her career, the girl didn't know what romance was, until he, reborn, expressed his desire to be in a relationship. The grown-up boy finally understood he had a chance, but time and again, his attentions were completely lost on the naive girl. She didn't realize this was the boy's love for her. The boy still infinitely followed the girl's thoughts, but now he wanted to be selfish for once. Jeffrey's hope was that Charlotte could enjoy life without worries. Even if it was his most beloved disciple, if they were about to threaten her life safety, Jeffrey would resolutely stand up to eliminate all threats. Jeffrey raised the sword in his hand, pinning it high in the air. The blade pointed directly at Charlotte's fifth disciple, Evan. All of this was because he learned that Evan was the identity of evil. According to Ifpadra, Evan now had a human identity, but deep inside his body was the soul of evil. Just because Evan's crimson pupils were the same as evil's. Jeffrey swung his sword at him. With a clever jump, Evan also deflected his attack. Jeffrey pressed on with his advantage, using his arm to pin Evan against the wall. Charlotte let you stay by her side for so long, even made you her disciple. I truly feel sorry for her. You don't deserve this. Faced with his judgment, Evan laughed instead of getting angry. With a raised corner of his mouth, he replied, "Do you think she's really been kept in the dark?" And his next words hit Jeffrey hard. "It's you who has no right to interfere between us. But how can the definition of feelings be judged by others?" Jeffrey directly threw caution to the wind. He suddenly launched an attack on Evan. Jeffrey refuted Evan's words. If he said there was no reason for him to interfere between them, then now was the best time to intervene between them. His gaze became sharp and terrifying. At this moment, he only wanted to strike Evan down with one sword. This way, he would no longer have to worry about Charlotte or continue to be troubled by evil. Facing Jeffrey's attack, Evan's measures were also unfair. Even several attacks that he could have dodged, he chose to endure them with his body. Because Evan also understood that even though Jeffrey's words were harsh, he wouldn't dare to kill him. If he killed him, Jeffrey would be resented by Charlotte for life. Realizing Evan's tactics, Jeffrey also didn't want to continue fighting with him. However, the moment he turned his back on Evan also wanted to get even. He had long known that this old man liked his master. Therefore, he desperately hoped that this old man could leave his master forever. Just as their battle was about to erupt again, a dazzling golden light appeared between them. The powerful roar obstructed everyone's vision. Charlotte appeared just in time to stop the two fighting. Jeffrey was confused. He never thought Charlotte would arrive so quickly. Charlotte's appearance also disrupted his plans. But what he feared was that Charlotte would blame him for hurting Evan. As expected, the moment Charlotte turned around, she saw the blood on Evan's body. Seeing her silent expression, Jeffrey hurriedly tried to explain. But before he could finish his explanation, Charlotte turned to him and said that from now on, their actions would not be together. She would take Evan away herself to investigate everything. Jeffrey was very afraid. Afraid of losing Charlotte, Jeffrey immediately stated his position. He wanted to protect Charlotte, but Charlotte refused his request. She then summoned a teleportation magic circle. Jeffrey understood that he couldn't stop Charlotte's decision. As he was leaving, he told Charlotte if he died, he would choose to follow her. Charlotte promised him she would take care of herself. 1 second before the magic circle disappeared, Jeffrey finally mustered all his courage and shouted, "I love you," to Charlotte. Charlotte turned her head in disbelief. Seeing this, Evan covered his master's eyes and took her away from here. Watching Charlotte disappear before his eyes, Jeffrey was completely desperate. He turned to leave this place. This parting, who knows when they would meet again. Poor, deeply affectionate Jeffrey. How could he compare to the warm and caring disciple? In Charlotte's eyes, she thought all of this was just what friends do. Evan also brought Charlotte to the demon realm, and here, they would embark on a new adventure story. But when Charlotte woke up from her deep sleep, her hands were bound with magic-suppressing handcuffs. It was the demon she had risked her life to defeat. He had returned and become her fifth disciple. However, when the young girl woke up, she was brought to the place where the demon race resided. There was an additional magic chain on her hand. That end seemed to be connected to something. She gently pulled, and out came a silver-haired man. Charlotte looked closely, only to find that the silver-haired man was actually Evan. He raised the chain on his hand. This was a high-level magical artifact that could seal magical power. It seemed to be a pair. But why were she and Evan chained together? At this moment, she slowly approached Evan. Seeing that the color of his pupils had returned to normal, she asked how his injuries were. Upon hearing his reply that he had already received treatment, Charlotte raised the handcuffs and asked him what was going on. Evan hurriedly replied that it wasn't his doing. Strange, who could have done this? Charlotte stood up and asked him where this place was. At this moment, he suddenly said, "Lady Charlotte, I've changed my mind." Before Charlotte could react, Evan took her hand and walked towards the balcony. He pointed to the village in front of them, explaining to Charlotte that this was a demon village called Moloch, located southwest of Asterbell. The two had accidentally fallen into this village due to the disruption of magical flow. However, this village was far more complex than what they could see. Charlotte raised the chain on her hand, asking why the village chief had put this on them. The village chief first gave a strange smile, then stood up and said, "Because you're mages. All the demons here have been hurt by humans before. Now that you two suddenly fell from the sky, we had to take some safety measures." When Charlotte said they would leave immediately, the village chief smiled and said, "You two are rare guests in our village. Those bracelets won't interfere with your daily life. Please stay here and rest for a while." After the village chief left, Charlotte couldn't help but doubt. They sealed their magic power out of caution against humans, but now they're asking them to rest easy. It was strange. At this moment, she turned to ask Evan if he didn't resist when they put this on. But Evan didn't answer this question. Instead, he asked Charlotte if she didn't want to ask him anything else. But before Charlotte could speak, he playfully said, "Even if you ask, I won't answer honestly. But I will slowly, bit by bit, tell you everything. So you have to promise me, before you hear my explanation, you can't leave me." Suddenly, a loud bang interrupted their thoughts. A purple-haired girl, blushing, said she was here to bring them clothes. She forgot to knock just now and apologized. While Evan was changing clothes, the purple-haired girl curiously asked, "Are you two really not lovers?" When Charlotte replied that they were just close master and disciple, the girl skeptically said, "Is that so?" This made Charlotte feel like she couldn't explain herself. The purple-haired girl smiled and said, "He's really different from yesterday. He's indeed more docile in front of his lover." At this point, Charlotte asked if any other mages had worn these handcuffs besides them. The girl stammered, saying there probably hadn't been any. At this moment, Charlotte suddenly noticed that the girl was wearing a necklace. It was clearly the symbol of Oswell, representing the followers of evil. At night, the purple-haired girl said she would take them to understand important areas of the village. They came to a cave. Evan reminded them that many people were secretly observing them around. Charlotte had noticed this too, but what she wanted to know more was what was in the darkness ahead. At this moment, the little boy from earlier suddenly appeared. He handed Charlotte a note at the time, saying there was an existence in this village. The purple-haired girl asked the boy ominously, "What are you doing?" Before she could finish speaking, she was caught in a net by a group of children. It turned out they were here to rescue Charlotte and Evan. From the children, they learned that the evil of the world was in that darkness. But an ordinary net couldn't hold the purple-haired girl. This time she was thoroughly angered. Red flames flashed behind her. Charlotte instantly understood that she was summoning a magical beast. But at this moment, their hands were bound with sealing tools. In this crisis, they could only resort to the 36 stratagems and retreat first. In the face of such powerful force, what should we do? Of course, run away. After all, Charlotte didn't want to get hurt at this time, but she wasn't really running away. It was to give Evan room to maneuver. For someone like the purple-haired girl, it was a piece of cake for Evan. All the monsters summoned by her were annihilated, completely losing her previous arrogance. She was now so scared, she just wanted to go home to her mother. But Evan didn't intend to take her life. He just tore off the necklace from her body, turned around, and handed it to Charlotte. They thought it was over, but unexpectedly, the village chief slowly walked out from the darkness. Even if transformed into a demon, but if anyone dared to harm even a hair on his master's head, he would strike back with the fury of thunder, having finally resolved the mess with Zimao. However, from the darkness deep in the cave entrance, the village chief of the demon village slowly walked out. What's going on? Facing Zimao's failure, the village chief was full of reproach. Zimao had really disappointed him. It seemed he would have to take matters into his own hands. The children, seeing the tentacles extending behind the village chief, shouted that it was evil. It must be evil. Charlotte murmured, "That was a very rare magical beast. But why would it appear here?" Before Charlotte could figure it out, Evan rushed forward, sending all those magical beasts to the afterlife. Seeing the situation turn unfavorable, the village chief turned to run away. Seeing this, Charlotte pulled Evan and chased after him. Seeing the fleeing village chief, Evan directly kicked him to the ground. Seeing the village chief lying on the ground, Charlotte stepped forward and asked where the main body of the magical beast was. But the village chief seemed to still not understand his position. He continued to arrogantly state that no matter how strong they were mere ants before that great person. Until he was beaten up, he finally obediently gave gave them directions. But he still didn't give up. He turned and set a trap for them. Sure enough, he was met with another beating. Then Evan pulled him and jumped into the light circle. And before their eyes was the magical beast Bellicenia. Bellicenia was an ancient magical beast with the ability to absorb everything around it and convert it into its own domain. Charlotte stood in front of the magical beast, thinking that they had made it in time. The magical beast had stopped growing for now. Just as she was about to step forward to save people, Evan stopped her. He was worried Charlotte might get hurt, so he decided to do it himself. But Charlotte was uneasy. After all, Evan had no practical experience. It was too risky. These people might all be traumatized if things went wrong. Evan smiled and told her not to worry. He wouldn't let anyone get hurt. With just a gentle wave of his hand, the magical beast voluntarily retracted its substance. This left Elia stunned. After saving the people, they tied up those bad guys, but they weren't Oswell members. Recalling what Zimao had just said, he couldn't remember that person's appearance, but he would recognize him as soon as he saw him. If Zimao wasn't lying, it's very likely that the other party used magic that prevents others from seeing his appearance clearly. But Charlotte had to find out. The person who had come to the village, exploiting the demon's hatred for humans, instigating them to capture people, giving them necklaces with the Oswell symbol, planting the magical beast in this village, and calling himself evil. What exactly was his relationship with Evan? At this time, Jeffrey from the Mabel Nation visited again. He no longer looked as spirited as before. Cassilian also teased Jeffrey, saying how he looked like he had just been dumped after not seeing him for a few days. Jeffrey replied with a hint of sadness that it wasn't a breakup because he hadn't given an answer yet. This man was looking sad. Why wouldn't the girl he liked just like him back? Upon hearing this, the Emperor almost burst out laughing. Jeffrey sure knew how to joke. After a round of jokes, the Emperor asked him seriously what was Klaus's stance. Jeffrey earnestly stated that for Klaus, this was equally a huge threat, an enemy we must eliminate. So he would take this opportunity to lead Klaus's knights, track down all those related to evil, including Evan, and eliminate them completely. Seeing this, the Emperor asked him another question. 8 years ago, the Master disguised himself as Elia, and you not only helped him hide his identity, but also protected him all along. But if the Master continues to use magic, what would be the consequences? He wanted to know the truth behind it. Even the fifth disciple, who usually openly favored the Master, when it came to the Master's disappearance for 8 years, would have his own emotions about it. After dealing with the few people from the demon village who had committed wrongdoings, Charlotte continued to the next step of the investigation. But Evan started to throw a little tantrum at this time. He hoped to go eat strawberry pie with Charlotte. Charlotte said they could go after everything was cleared up. It wouldn't be too late. Evan suddenly leaned in and said it would be too late by then. I thought we had all the time in the world. But 8 years ago, you suddenly disappeared. Just as Charlotte didn't know what to say, the carriage suddenly jolted. The two accidentally embraced. At this moment, Evan slowly said, "Lady Charlotte, if you knew what I was thinking during those 8 years, you would surely run away." After saying this, he took a bite of a cookie, then turned around and said they had arrived. Charlotte was stunned for a long time before she reacted. It seemed that Evan, because of her past disappearance, was now throwing a little tantrum, seeing that they both had gotten off. The village chief who was tied up and brought along to guide them explained, "That great person disappeared through this portal." Charlotte looked at the portal in front of her, feeling strangely puzzled. If that person wanted to go somewhere else, he could have just used teleportation magic directly. There was no need to go to the trouble of setting up a fixed portal. There must be a special reason for this. As Evan activated it, this portal connected 2 places. One was Monrain on the border of Klaus, and the other place was actually there. Julian had also stayed there after losing his memory. Traces of evil had also appeared there, but there was no portal there. But fixed portals only work when both are used simultaneously. This meant that someone had destroyed the portal on the other side. This couldn't be a coincidence. From that moment on, he had been constantly appearing before Charlotte. So she decided to test Evan again to see if he had anything to do with this matter. So she left the decision to Evan, whether to go through the portal to chase that person or to go eat strawberry pie. Shinji Wei, the career-focused straight woman, was pursued by both a domineering puppy and a passionate wolf pup at the same time. One silently guarded her side in the identity of a disciple. The other paved the way and protected her under the guise of friendship. The puppy, Evan, first extended an invitation. He wanted to eat strawberry pie with his master. Charlotte initially thought he was just being polite, but didn't expect he really wanted to eat strawberry pie. Upon hearing Evan's answer, Charlotte suddenly changed her mind. She had originally thought, if the portal there was destroyed by Evan, then the previous series of events might all have been intentionally guided by him. Had she guessed wrong? No, she must find out the truth of the matter. But when they went in, they found no one there. Could it be that Evan really just wanted to eat strawberry pie? Just as she was about to turn and leave, Evan suddenly called out to her. She turned her head and looked and saw 3 people standing in the portal. At this moment, a blonde woman walked over. Are you the guides? Oswell even sent people to receive us. You two are both my type, but you're not wearing formal attire for the banquet. That's a bit disappointing. Before she could finish speaking, Charlotte directly used magic to tie her up. The blonde cursed angrily. How dare you kidnap me? Do you know who I am? Charlotte looked at the invitation, calmly reading out his name. The blonde yelled that the name was fake. Who would be stupid enough to use their real name to attend such a party? The previously agitated blonde suddenly saw his 2 guards fall to the ground motionless. He immediately became submissive. Charlotte asked him exasperatedly who he really was. The blonde confidently stated that he was the only daughter of the head of the Burt Merchant Group. But unexpectedly, the 2 showed no reaction upon hearing this, which embarrassed the blonde. At this point, Charlotte spoke up, saying she just wanted to attend that party. The blonde advised them that even if they stole his invitation, they couldn't get in unless they wore formal attire like his. Before he could finish speaking, some indescribable things happened. He and Evan successfully entered the party. This party looked like a very ordinary social gathering, but there must be some unknown secrets within it. If Oswell and Evan had any connection, then someone would approach Evan here. Suddenly, a man walked over. Miss, I see you've been standing here alone. If possible, may I invite you to dance? Charlotte was about to extend her hand when Evan immediately stopped her. Charlotte awkwardly held his hand, saying, My companion is a bit mischievous. The man was about to speak when a subordinate whispered something in his ear. Seeing that he was about to leave, Charlotte said in a sad tone, What a pity. It's rare to meet someone I can talk to. I was hoping to have a private heart-to-heart with you. Charlotte guiltily avoided Evan's gaze. The man, upon hearing the words heart-to-heart, instantly perked up. Charlotte immediately seized the opportunity and extended her hand, wearing Oswell's emblem. In fact, when entering the party, Charlotte had felt something was off. This man happened to be the host of the party, the Baron. The Baron also wore a necklace with the same pattern. But through conversation, she learned that this Baron was actually a pervert. He took pleasure in killing people, and torturing others made him happy. The reason he held this party was actually all part of his scheme. He held such parties just for his own amusement. At this moment, the lights at the party suddenly dimmed. People below murmured, wondering why it suddenly got dark. Was there some special event? Charlotte then said, If you start a killing spree here, it might be hard to clean up, right? This is in the central area. If something happens to the party guests, you'll quickly be identified as the culprit. Unexpectedly, the Baron showed no signs of remorse. Instead, he arrogantly stated that everyone in this city would be dead tonight. At this point, this foolish Baron still believed that he had been chosen by that person. But what he didn't know was that he was just a scapegoat. This was all part of that person's plot. The reason he gave the Baron such powerful abilities was to see what an ignorant fool would do if given power beyond imagination. He would inevitably do something extraordinarily stupid. Jeffrey and others were rushing towards this place because he discovered that something big was about to happen in this city. This man who didn't know his own limits was attempting to destroy the entire city. Faced with his provocation, Charlotte didn't hesitate. She immediately punched him. Before the Baron could speak, Charlotte grabbed him by the collar and delivered another heavy punch. As his clothes were torn, Charlotte saw many characters spreading across his body. She turned and shouted to Evan not to use magic, otherwise the surrounding magical energy would react. After receiving Evan's affirmative response, she ripped the necklace off the Baron's body. She questioned him, What was in the pendant before? What did you summon using your body as a medium? The Baron laughed and said, Of course, it's a group of treasures. These darlings will explode. They'll definitely clean this city spotlessly. Outside, the entire city was surrounded by red frogs. At this time, most of the knights and mages had gathered together. Although they weren't clear about what was happening, what they needed to do now was to help ordinary citizens escape from here, because these frogs could explode at any moment. People inside heard the loud noises outside and were in chaos. At this time, a large number of frogs also appeared inside the building. People were so scared they wanted to escape, but unexpectedly, the main door was locked. Suddenly, the Baron laughed loudly. Isn't it interesting? The show hasn't even started yet, and they're already scared shitless. Charlotte looked at his arrogant appearance and asked, I don't know if you're just oblivious or too stupid. You say the chosen one won't die. Your body has been cursed, and you're still so pleased with yourself. When the curse covers your entire body, you'll be shattered to pieces. The Baron looked at her in disbelief. What did you say? Charlotte ignored him. The Baron watched her leave, wanting to ask her for clarification. But as he reached out, Evan stepped on his foot. Suddenly, there was a loud bang. The main door was kicked open by a man. Charlotte turned to look. The newcomer was the prodigy Jeffrey. He just took a light step forward, and all the great mages obeyed his every command. He only needed to release a dazzling golden smoke, and the fire mages would stand in the high sky of the continent, casting that powerful spatial magic array. To minimize the damage caused by the frog monsters, Charlotte decided to use a powerful spatial teleportation array to transfer all the monsters away. At this time, people in the city still didn't know what was happening. Children playfully grabbed the exploding frogs. As managers of the city, they didn't want to spread the true information to avoid panic in the city. This would be unfavorable for evacuating people. As the leader of the evacuation, Belmont believed that the Grand Duke and the King could solve everything, until he saw the dazzling golden fireworks in the sky. That was the marble, the gathering signal commonly used by mages before. Killheart, who was on the other side of the city, also saw this scene. When he came back to his senses, Jeffrey and others had also arrived here. I didn't expect you to be here too. Jeffrey, seeing Killheart, was slightly relieved, because this also meant that Danmont must be nearby. This way, he wouldn't need to let Evan get involved in the matters here, preventing things from getting worse. The giant frog monsters were controlled by the position of the medium. Because Evan was dragging the Baron, the medium, around, the giant frogs were chasing them everywhere. Fortunately, Killheart had already evacuated the surrounding crowd. This way, the open space was enough for them to unleash their powers. They could also relax a bit. At this time, Charlotte was at another location, initiating the summoning array. Belmont, who received the fireworks signal, arrived at the scene. Charlotte told Belmont that they would summon portals in the sky, then send all those exploding monsters away. Hearing this news, Belmont was incredulous. Summoning a teleportation array in the sky was unheard of. To enhance the magic power, Charlotte would use Manhwa to establish magic pillars at 5 starting points. And after the magic pillars were established, Evan would connect them and maintain the generated magic power until the portal opened. Finally, they would use the portal to send all the monsters away. Charlotte reached for Belmont's magic staff. Before he could react, let me borrow your magic staff for a moment. At this moment, the giant frog monsters were running around the city, until Evan let go of the medium in his hand. Jeffrey immediately told Killheart beside him, that's the culprit of this incident, also the medium of the curse. Now it's your responsibility to watch over that scum. After receiving the signal notification from the master on the other side, Evan immediately cast a teleportation spell. He arrived at a tall tower in the city. But at this moment, the mysterious man suddenly appeared. Didn't I tell you not to appear before me again? The mysterious man ignored Evan's warning and instead muttered to himself, this is a good opportunity right now. The great mage's condition is worse than I imagined. Also, how long are you going to keep pretending to be Charlotte's disciple?